All right, so shit was kind of popping off last couple days, so I didn't really get a chance to cover anything. So we will briefly touch on the harassment of Singh when we first start off, and then we'll move on to the horrific shootings that happened in Buffalo the other day, and then we will have some fun with the Ontario leaders debate. So,
NDP is reacting after receiving a rough ride from protesters in Peterborough this week. Jagmeet Singh was jeered during a visit on Tuesday. In videos posted on social media, demonstrators gathered around Singh as he left a campaign event. Some of them yelled obscenities and called Singh a traitor. The New Democrat has put out a statement saying, sadly, polarization and disinformation are real dangers to our society. While disagreements are fundamental to a thriving democracy, hatred, violence, and wishing death upon others threaten it. The protest happened during a visit by Singh in support of a local candidate running in next month's provincial election.
This is what federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was met with as he left Peterborough on Tuesday. A loud group yelling obscenities as Singh made his way to a vehicle. These videos are now going viral on social media, and the incident is making national headlines. Singh now saying he received death threats.
What I really want to highlight, there was folks that were saying some really bad, some really horrible things. They were saying, some folks were saying, I hope you die, and things along that nature. A lot of aggression and violence in terms of the behavior and demeanor.
Singh spoke again to reporters on Thursday afternoon.
For me personally and for my staff, I would say that was one of the most intense, threatening, insulting, and physically there was that feeling of intense threat. But I'm not personally surprised by that nor worried by that. I've experienced worse.
But is your staff worried? Are the people around you worried?
Yes, they are worried.
That should never happen. That's intolerable in our system for anybody, not just the leader of a political party.
Singh was in town Tuesday to throw his support behind Peterborough Kawartha NDP candidate Jen Dexbid in the upcoming provincial election. And while things got out of hand outside, there was no police presence, which has come into question by many on social media. In a tweet, Peterborough police stated they weren't even aware that Singh was in town on Tuesday. Despite multiple emails, Global News was not granted an interview with Peterborough police on Thursday. Instead, the service released a prepared video statement.
Your actions and belief systems are reprehensible, unconscionable, and in some cases, criminal. Peterborough Police Service will use every investigative tool possible to deal with your actions. We've received a complaint in regards to the incident, and we are actively investigating.
Global News also reached out to DEC for comment but didn't hear back by deadline. Meanwhile, Peterborough Kawartha Conservative MP Michelle Ferreri says there are other ways to get your point across without using hate speech or threats.
I condemn hate speech and violence in any form. Full stop. protesting is part of democracy, right? I mean, and we're all elected officials. And so it's important that people are able to execute their right to voice their concerns. But the reality is, you can't harass people, you can't name call, go after policy, do a constructive method to get involved in politics.
Ferrari tells Global News she reached out to Singh to show support for him and to say the incident isn't what Peterborough stands for. As for Singh, in a tweet following the incident, he stated, "Peterborough, I love you. Don't worry, I'll be back." Mark Giunta, Global News.
Heartbreaking. Scenes out of Buffalo have shaken many Canadians, but there is hate here too. 26 people killed and 40 wounded on Canadian soil due to ideologically motivated violent extremism since 2014. according to the most recent CSIS report.
Right-wing extremism and terrorism is an international movement. Canada is far, far better than any other context. But I mean, we still have trash in our yard as well.
This is the really frightening thing, and I think surprising thing is that proportionally, if we just talk about the number of groups, it's very similar to the U.S.
Barbara Perry's research has identified 300 active right-wing hate groups in Canada, and she says there are likely tens of thousands more people drawn to the movement without being part of a group. CSIS has been devoting more resources to the threat of violent extremism.
The combination of major disruptive events like the pandemic, the ever-increasing influence of social media, and the spread of conspiracy theories has created an environment ripe for exploitation by influencers and extremists.
The spy agency's head was recently testifying at a parliamentary committee about the convoy in Ottawa with a number of individuals known to CSIS. Conservative Michelle Rempel-Garner called out one of the convoy leaders currently in custody, Pat King, condemning him on Twitter for espousing the Great Replacement theory and calling others to do the same.
It's a form of hate. It has no basis in reality. It's conspiratorial.
The Great Replacement theory is believed to be a motive in the Buffalo shooting, a racist and anti-Semitic conspiracy theory about a plot to replace white people spearheaded by Jews. In Canada, in In 2020, Jews were the biggest target of hate crimes against religious minorities.
Canada's got to look at hate online and how we can better regulate that.
Every time there's a tragedy like this, you sort of think, could we have done it? Could we have done it faster? But it's also important to do it right.
While Minister Omar Alghabra says hate needs to be taken more seriously than ever before, including by politicians.
Whenever comes time to condemn such a mass shooting, everybody rallies around and condemning it, but ignore the fact that some leaders have come close to looking like if they're not endorsing it, that they're tolerating it or looking the other way.
Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
And we have more now on our top story, that racially motivated mass shooting in Buffalo, New York. 10 people were shot and killed yesterday. 3 more were wounded, all after a gunman dressed in tactical gear opened fire at a supermarket in a mostly black neighborhood. Some of the reaction we're seeing to the violence, U.S. President Joe Biden, he is calling it horrific, saying there is no harbor for domestic terrorism. The head of the NAACP calls the shooting absolutely devastating. And in this country, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canadians across the country are grieving with the people of Buffalo. For more from the scene, here's CNN's Gloria Pazmino in Buffalo.
What we know so far is that officials believe this was an act of hate. Peyton Gendron, driven by hate, by racism, which he wrote about extensively online. He targeted this area of Buffalo, the eastern part of the city, where there is a large African-American community. 10 people killed in that shooting yesterday afternoon when he arrived at this parking lot here behind me, opened fire, striking 4 people, 3 of them fatally. He then moved inside that supermarket where he was met by an armed security guard, a former police officer who was unable to stop him. He continued to shoot while inside the store, and then he exited the supermarket and surrendered to authorities. We also know, as you mentioned, that he was wearing tactical military style gear, including a camera that was affixed to a helmet he was wearing. He live streamed the shooting live on the internet. Officials saying that they are investigating this as a hate crime. Brendan has been charged with a murder in the first degree. He pleaded not guilty shortly after he was indicted yesterday.
With a look from the scene, that was CNN's Gloria Pazmino. And now for his perspective, we've reached Uhuru Williams. He's a professor. Professor of History at the University of St. Thomas and a founding director of the Racial Justice Initiative, which focuses on supporting racial justice education. And we've reached him in St. Paul, Minnesota. Good morning, and thank you for being on the program today.
Good morning, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So I just wanted to start by getting your reaction to this shooting. What went through your mind when you first learned of it?
I was deeply saddened, but not surprised. I disagree with President Biden when he says there's no harbor for this, because clearly in North America, with the number of attacks that we've seen against communities of color, this has become a common occurrence, and certainly with the proliferation of guns here in the United States, this is a common occurrence. These are two issues that we need to work on as a broader society and culture to address so we can end incidents like this. There's really no need for what we saw happen yesterday, and it's sad, and I was saddened by the fact that we have yet another incident like this that we have to mourn.
So many people are saddened by this, of course, in your country as well as here in Canada as well. And the mayor was saying that this is the worst nightmare that could happen. Happen for a community, saying that his community is hurting and seething. And he was quick to point out that this individual allegedly traveled from a community for several hours to get to this location. What did you think of that?
Clear indication that there was planning, that this individual targeted that community for very specific reasons. People are waking up and surprised and hurt and saddened by this. There's also this current concern about what do we do to deal with the proliferation of ideas like this, which are clearly damaging to communities, which clearly can lead to violence, but then also also, and this is being very generous to the shooter, how do we stop this type of radicalization online in spaces where people have access to this type of irresponsible, hate-filled message that they then take to produce actions like this?
As the allegations are that he live streamed these incidents right on that social media platform. And also, of course, that this happened at a supermarket in the middle of the day. What do you think about the location and the timing of these alleged shootings?
Incredibly heinous, and again, unfortunately, something we've seen has become more common. We've seen terrorists, and I think it's appropriate to describe this individual as a terrorist, targeting people in spaces where they're incredibly vulnerable, at times when they're very vulnerable. This happened in New York City not too long ago in the subway during rush hour. We saw it in this particular case. We can talk about the incident in Texas a couple years back. And it's so global. We can talk about what happened in New Zealand. There's clearly this intent on the part of individuals who are driven by this type of anger to target people when they're vulnerable and where they're vulnerable. And this, to me, was particularly heinous given the time of day and the location, the supermarket.
Reigniting a conversation about hate crimes in your country and, as you mentioned, right around the world and here in Canada as well. And we also know that Reverend Al Sharpton has called on the White House to convene a meeting of Black and Jewish and Asian leaders to discuss combating hate crimes. What do you think of that move?
I think it's important, but I think we're in a stage now where we have to think beyond these types of conferences. I think it's an important first step, but the reality is, what concrete action can we take? The governor of New York this morning was very clear that she puts emphasis on what multimedia companies, what social media companies can do to help tamp down on this type of thing. Operates online. There's also conversation about what we can do with regard to access to firearms and how we deal with that issue. So when we look at these two issues, certainly a conference and conversation about how to talk about these issues is important, but also we need action in those two critical areas.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us on what is such a difficult day for so many. I appreciate all of your thoughts and comments this morning.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.
Yahuru Williams, a founding director of the Racial Justice Initiative in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Lives cut short in a grocery store. Three other wounded by a hate-filled individual who had driven 200 miles from Binghamton in that range to carry out a murderous, racist rampage that he would live stream to the world. What happened here is simple and straightforward: terrorism. Terrorism. Domestic terrorism. Violence inflicted in the service of hate and the vicious thirst for power that defines one group of people being inherently inferior to any other group. A hate that through the media and politics, the internet, has radicalized, angry, alienated, lost, and isolated individuals into falsely believing that they will be replaced, that's the word, replaced, by the other. by people who don't look like them and who are therefore in a perverse ideology that they possess and being fed lesser beings. I and all of you reject the lie. I call on all Americans to reject the lie. And I condemn those who spread the lie for power, political gain, and for profit.
Aaron Salter Jr. wore many hats in his life: retired police officer, substitute teacher, but one of his true passions was science. He built a lab in his garage where he spent countless hours working to develop an engine that could run on water.
It's not running off of gas fumes? No, there's no gas fumes. There's no gas fumes.
Sadly, for all he was in life, the world is learning his story because of the courage he displayed doing his job, protecting his community. Working security at the Tops grocery store, Salter engaged the shooter, who was heavily protected by body armor.
We have evidence that he struck him at least one time, and that unfortunately had no effect.
Not everyone would have made the same choice, to run towards gunfire. And with his experience, 30 years on the Buffalo Police Force, he had to have guessed the shooter had an assault rifle. Yet Salter tried, ultimately in vain, to save the lives of others.
Aaron was, a great individual, and I know he, in his heart, he wanted to save as many people. As he could. And it didn't surprise me to hear that he engaged the guy right away that tried to stop him.
Salter retired from the Buffalo Police Force in 2018, and by all accounts, he didn't need this job at Tops, working security.
Surviving a job in law enforcement and making retirement, it's a big deal for you personally and for your family, because they expect, you can kind of ride it out now and enjoy your life.
But Salter chose to continue serving his community because he believed he could make it better. Now his former colleagues are trying to get him reinstated into that police force for a single day so his city can honor him with the formal police funeral they say he deserves. Mike Drolet, Global News.
Sadly, nothing new. One alleged gunman espoused white supremacist rhetoric against an Hispanic invasion before a massacre in El Paso, Texas. Another warned of a Jewish invasion before the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. And now, white replacement theory was cited by the alleged shooter of black Americans in Buffalo. What is new and disturbing is the growing embrace of that conspiracy in the U.S., that white culture and white supremacy are being replaced by the power of immigrants and other minorities.
That's what's happening, actually. Let's just say it. That's true.
It's a message heard today on mainstream media.
I have less political power because they're importing a brand new electorate. Why should I sit back and take that?
New York's governor says that rhetoric is selling us versus them.
The them, the immigrants, the Jews, the blacks are coming after us. the white people in this country.
Some critics say President Trump's tolerance for the fringe right was a springboard for white grievance.
This is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing.
He became sort of a mouthpiece for a lot of these fringe right-wing movements that have gradually over time now become much more embraced by people who are working in Congress, people in popular media outlets like Tucker Carlson.
The lawyer for one Buffalo family says victims must use the law to hold those responsible for providing a platform for racial hatred.
The people who inspire the hate on websites and internet services and cable news stations, those people who radicalize these young people.
The killing of Muslims at a mosque in Quebec in 2017 and the vehicle killing of a Muslim family in London, Ontario last year. Year show this country is not immune.
Those pieces are absolutely here in the Canadian context, the fear of the other overcoming us numerically and politically and socially.
Barbara Perry says in this country, just as the FBI says in the U.S., the greatest domestic terror threat today is homegrown racial hatred. Buffalo, apparently the latest example. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
That fixed it. So. I think it will add for the fall. I hope it fixed. It. Oh, I did. Have I seen the shooting videos? Bits and pieces of it. It's just fucking wild to me. And like the same shit pops off here too, and it's ridiculous. And the security guard who sacrificed his life should be given a full proper burial. They should definitely honor him. Let's see here. Take a look at this. We'll take a look. The suspect created a Twitch account in 2017, but he had primarily used it for other streamers' videos. Didn't Twitch take it down within like minutes or something? Wait, the real test? That's kind of a self-report. 25 minutes. I thought he was driving for like 4 fucking hours. Yeah, shortly after Twitch removed the video, however, at least one viewer watched in real time, took a copy, saved on their computer, shared it around. There are sites. And like it also has been popping off on like fucking right-wing social media too. Like the fucking right-wingers see him as a hero, and it's disgusting. Upload right message board, neo-Nazi channels, services, Telegram. Yeah, that makes sense. Of course, it'd be fucking Telegram. Care about like anything.
Good afternoon. We want to take this time to thank the media for coming out and sharing with the Whitfield family. Let's take a moment to pause and pray with the family and all who are hurting by this grossly hateful crime against victims of Buffalo. Father, we thank you and we honor you. We give you glory, God, for you are our strength, strength like no other. God, we pray that you would comfort the family, the Whitfield family, and all families who are affected by this heinous crime. We pray for the peace and the love of God that surpasses all understanding. We give you glory, honor, and praise. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. I want to take this opportunity to introduce Attorney Ben Crump, who shall come at this time. Attorney Crump.
Thank you. Father, family, if we can all come up together, family. Let's be united.
Gonna hop off. All right, see you later. Live every Wednesday doing this stuff like this.
Good morning. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, along with Attorney Terry O'Connell. Along with Attorney Terry
Awesome. I hope to see you soon.
Who is a great lawyer who hails here in Buffalo, New York, as well as Attorney Ken Abano, who has offices in New York and Cleveland, Ohio, but was born here in Buffalo, New York. And along with Attorney Fu Zimmerman, we have the honor, the privilege of representing the family of a great lady, hero for this community, angel for her family, and you bear witness to her legacy, what she did as a mother. She raised a remarkable family. You will hear from her children about her sacrifice, about her dedication, her commitment as a loving, faithful wife for 68 years to her husband, Garnell Whitfield Sr.
It's sad that she had to lose a son. Like, no one should fucking have to lose their fucking child to shit like this. It's fucking ridiculous.
So painful and emotional. This is so difficult. Thank you so much, Pastor Copley, for your prayers, and we need them now more than ever. Okay. We will try to proceed during this hard time for the family. She was committed to her husband. She was committed to her children. And obviously, you see, she was very committed to her grandchildren. You have a whole host of her grandchildren who are present here at this church with her 4 children. Her son, Garnell Jr., her son, Raymond, her daughters, Angela and her daughter, Robin. After I give some remarks, you will hear from Attorney Connors and Attorney Abano, and then you will hear from the people who knew her best. You will hear from the people who are the only people who can give appropriate voice for Ruth Whitfield, and that is her children, her family. And so I wanted to be clear that what happened on Saturday was an act of domestic terrorism.
Not just domestic terrorism, stochastic terrorism as well.
And we have to define it as such. We can't sugarcoat it. We can't try to explain it away, talking about mental illness. No, this was an act of domestic terrorism perpetrated by a young white supremacist. There is no question about his intentions. And just like America responds to terrorism, America needs to respond to this act of bigotry, racism, and hate as a terrorist act. You know, so often we try to explain things away when you have a young white mass murderers killed.
I wonder if they labeled this guy as a lone wolf. I would not be surprised if they did, because generally a lot of acts like this, especially when it's done by a fucking white or white passing person, generally are considered to be fucking lone wolves.
Innocent people. There is no mistaking Attorney Abano about his actions. In that manifesto, he made his intentions clear. He went to...
I mean, like, to be fair though, if like you ever write a fucking manifesto, that should just be game over. You should like fucking lose all rights to like weapons and shit. Like that's just a self-report at this point, right?
Tops supermarket here in Buffalo, New York, in this predominantly African-American community, with the objective to kill as many black people as he could.
Didn't he also like point a gun at like some fucking white people and then like said sorry because, you know, he fucking pointed a gun at them? That's what I heard, at least.
That was his objective. And so we need to make sure that the world knows that we have to respond to this act of terrorism. We intend to not only hold accountable this sick, depraved monster for his hateful act.
They should 100% be trying to rehabilitate him. Like, as much as I hate pieces of shit like this, for the amount of fucking violence and grotesque and deranged shit that they do, I still believe that they should be rehabilitated.
But we intend to hold those responsible for the root of the hate, the people who curate the hate, the people who inspire the hate on websites and internet services and cable news stations, those people who radicalize these young people to go out and orchestrate heinous acts of violence, heinous acts of hate.
I honestly think that Hassan did a really good coverage of like the whole like violence when it comes to like fucking video games and online circles and shit. Like, honestly, just watch his video on that. Like, he did a really good job on that.
That is what we have to do. We have to get to the root of the hate. Because if we don't get to the root of the hate, then sadly, I believe we will be back here again grieving the loss of other innocent black people. And we continue to acknowledge that it was intended as an act of violence against black people for specific reasons. He said it in his manifesto. And we look at that manifesto, Joe, and you have to acknowledge everything that he put in there was inspired by these people who are trying to motivate these young people.
Just say white supremacists and neo-Nazis. Like, that's who fucking radicalized him.
You know, you think about this race replacement theory that he talked about in this manifesto. There are people who are pushing this hatred on these young people, indoctrinating their minds to go out and commit violence. I mean, these politicians who are trying to, you know, use fear to inspire their base, to help get cable news ratings. It's these people who are accomplices to...
I mean, unfortunately, that's not how that works. Cable news mostly does fucking whatever can get the most clicks, and of course they're gonna be fucking clickbaiting the fuck out of this. They should 100% be putting more of a spotlight onto the fucking heroes of the story, like the security officer that had died, as well as the victims that have died as well. It's fucking nasty.
This mass murder. And Cliff, even though
Uh-oh.
to inspire their base, to help get cable news ratings, it's these people who are accomplices to this mass murder. And Cliff, even though they may not have pulled the trigger, they did load the gun for this young white supremacist. They loaded the gun. And we have to hold them accountable too. We cannot let people continue to radicalize our young people, to hate one another because the color of their skin.
Reach it, brother.
We're better than this, America, and we have to show the world that we're better than this. Because that's what Ruth Whitfield's spirit would command us to do as she looks down from heaven, to try to use this tragedy to inspire positive change, to inspire policy change, not just on the local level or the state level, but all over America. This is
Why just stop at America, brother? You should be going all worldwide. Like, I do agree though, like 100%. Like, you know, America does have a very big fucking white nationalist problem. I mean, we have our fair share too. But like, holy fuck, like things pop up so much in the States, it's crazy.
Ruth Whitfield's spirit commands us to do, to inspire change. You know, this is an opportunity for us to try to finish the policy that was initiated when the young white supremacist Dylann Roof killed all those innocent black people in the church in Charleston, South Carolina, Angela. I mean, we talked about then having an anti-black hate crime bill passed by the U.S. Congress, but it stalled.
I mean, of course it would stall, bro. They don't give a shit about you. Like, fuck, they don't even give a shit about, like, poor white people. Like, no one in the fucking States gives a shit. Outside of maybe Bernie. Like, and it's fucking disgusting that no one does.
And we saw last year, Stephanie, and we celebrated it, that they passed that anti-Asian hate bill. So maybe in the wake, Tiffany, of this tragedy here in Buffalo, New York, Raymond, just maybe, we can finally get the anti-black hate crime bill passed in the United States Congress in the spirit of these lost lives here in Buffalo, New York.
I mean, yeah, I 100% want that to be passed too. But unfortunately, I don't think that will come to fruition, which is really fucking sad.
We are imploring President Biden to use whatever influence he has to tell America we need to pass this bill because Black America is suffering right now. And we need to know that our top leaders in America react and respond when we are hurt too, like they acted and responded when others were hurt. I believe the anti-Asian hate crime bill passed with very little resistance. And so I expect the Democratic leadership to push forward this anti-black hate crime bill with the same conviction. It is only appropriate. It is only right. This is the spirit of Ruth Whitfield talking, to do something positive in the wake of all this pain. And as I get ready to introduce you to Attorney Connors, I just want to say on behalf of Garnell and Raymond and Angela and Robin and all of Ruth Whitfield's family, especially Mr. Whitfield Sr., that Ruth Whitfield was a person of love. And we won't let this act of hate define this person of love. Her family will define her legacy. Her family will remember her for the love that she instilled in them, in this community, and in this world. Her legacy will be a legacy of love, not hate. That is the legacy of Ruth Whitfield. And her children, in just a few minutes, will tell you why that is so important.
But plus, you know, she also raised a fucking hero too, so there's that.
America, why that is so important. At this time, I'm going to introduce you to a great lawyer who many of you here in Buffalo, New York know very well throughout the state of New York. He is...
I think once he's done, I'm gonna move on to something else because this is kind of sad. But yeah, no, I do fully support them.
He's a great lawyer and a prince of a man. Attorney Terry Connors is somebody who is a stakeholder in this community. And he's going to be a person who, along with the Whitfield family, help bring healing to Buffalo, New York. I give you Attorney Terry Connors to talk about the legal strategies that we're going to put forth. Attorney Connors.
Okay. I don't really want to watch this anymore. It's too sad. I want to watch something fun.
Vision Consortium that organized tonight's event agreed to the format and the rules, and the speaking order has been decided by a draw.
Just before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that.
So yeah, there's an election going down in Ontario sometime soon, and they're going to be having their debates. Like one of them was when 2 days ago, and yeah, let's make some fun of some fucking hogs.
That this studio is located on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit.
And with that, let's introduce the leaders according to their parties standing in the last Legislative Assembly.
Tonight, we welcome Ontario Progressive Conservative Party leader, Doug Ford. Ontario New Democratic Party leader, Andrea Horwath.
Let's go.
Ontario Liberal Party leader, Stephen Del Duca. And Green Party of Ontario leader, Mike Schreiner.
And we're going to begin tonight with a 1-minute opening statement. Mr. Ford, please start us off.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and thank you for joining us. Friends, I'm excited about the future of Ontario, but it's up to each of us to roll up our sleeves and get it done. We're the only party with a plan to cut through the excuses. We're the only party saying yes. We're saying yes to rebuilding our economy with better jobs and bigger paychecks. Yes to building highways and key infrastructure like 413 and the Bradford Bypass. We're saying yes.
Bro, you guys only fucking do so when, like, there's an election, especially a federal election. Like, you guys don't give a shit about anything else. Oh, man.
Yes to keeping costs down and putting more money back into your pockets. We've already scrapped the license fees, and we scrapped the tolls, and we're cutting the gas tax. We're saying yes for working for workers by getting more people in the skilled trades and manufacturing. And we're saying yes to keeping our economy and our province open today and for the future. Friends, let's say yes, let's get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Ms. Horwath.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm sure this is not the most fun thing you'll ever do on a Monday night, but because you're joining us, it shows that that you care and that this election has a lot at stake. So my message to you tonight is a pretty simple one. There's hope. There's hope that together we can fix the things that matter most to you. We can make sure our healthcare system is there when you need it, and that we clear the backlogs and get people's wait lists down. We can fix long-term care, get the care back in and the profits out. We can make sure everybody has a decent job, a job that actually pays the bills, and we can make sure that the affordability of housing and all of the other essentials are taken care of. We have a chance to do that this time around, and regardless of the last couple of governments, I know that together we can certainly make it happen. Take care of what matters to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horwath. Mr. Schreiner.
Healthy and Steve, thank you for moderating tonight, and thank all of you for joining us. It is now or never to address the climate crisis, and that's why we need to stop Mr. Ford.
I mean, yeah, but, like, you guys aren't gonna fucking win, though. Let's be real.
from paving over our future. We need affordable homes, not expensive highways that will primarily benefit a few wealthy land speculators and make life more expensive.
You know what else we need, brother? We also need high-speed rail. That would tremendously cut down the amount of fucking CO2 emissions that we have. And not just that, enforce a fucking carbon tax on fucking wealthy individuals and corporations. Force them to play a game instead of just, you know, saying whatever, who fucking cares.
Expensive for the rest of us. We need to stop the license plate gimmick supported by the NDP and Liberals that will drain billions from healthcare, education, and housing. We need new...
Like I said, invest into fucking public infrastructure. It will literally pay for itself, and we could have fucking trains. Like, how fucking... Who doesn't want to have fucking trains, brother? Like, you will have reduce so much congestion, you'll reduce so much stress, you'll reduce so much fucking carbon emissions. Like, you don't even have to talk to your fucking enemy in China. You can literally fucking do so in Japan, or like even fucking Europe. Like, who doesn't want fucking dope ass high speed rails and like better fucking public transit? Like that, if you run on that, you will gain more votes, my guy.
Solutions to old problems so we can build a caring, connected, affordable, climate-ready Ontario. The kind of Ontario that protects the people and places we love in this province. We connect now to build the future you want. And that's what Ontario Green MPPs are ready to provide the leadership at Queen's Park.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiner. Mr. Del Duca.
Well, thanks very much. Good evening, Ontario. Thank you so much for tuning in.
There's no shot this guy wasn't a cop. He straight out looks like a fucking thumb.
The past 4 years have been really, really tough. And while I know Ontarians are strong and resilient, so many are still suffering in this province. You think about students forced to learn through screens, being isolated from their friends, seniors who are so concerned about ending up in for-profit.
I mean, if like Doug Ford did a better job when it came to fucking COVID, you wouldn't be in this mess. Or really just anyone in general. Like even your fucking party sucks.
Care. And the cost of everything going up for virtually everybody. Let's face it, the Ford Conservatives have walked away from their responsibility to lead and left you to fend for yourselves. And that's not good enough. Right now, they want to build a $10 billion highway, the 413. It's going to make a few of their donors wealthier. It's not going to do anything for you. Tonight, I'm going to focus on the Ontario Liberal plan to make your life more affordable if you're buying meals, taking public transit, or paying your rent. We're going to protect...
But wait. If you don't want to build the 413, what else are you going to do then? Like, literally, if the Liberals just run on fucking having, like, high-speed rail, universal housing, and increasing fucking, medical spending, they'll win, like, regardless. Like, that's how you gain a fuck ton of votes and gain a majority.
Protect our seniors at all costs. We're going to bring back an optional grade 13, and we're going to repair our schools. There's a choice in this election. Let's make our province truly a place to grow.
Thank you, Mr. Del Duca.
Just before we dive into questions, a quick word about format here. There are 4 main subject areas for debate tonight. The leaders will each have the chance to state their positions on the question, and then we're going to have one-on-one debate, followed by an open debate among the 4 of you. Now, Althea and I have been asked to enforce the rules, which means, leaders, you've got to stick to the allotted time that you've been given, and you can't all yell at each other all at the same time. They will cut the mics in the control room if you do that. That's the one complaint I hear from people more often than anything else. There are people timing
but it makes
each
it
of you in
way
the control
much more
room,
fun.
so we will do our best to make sure that everybody gets equal time.
The leaders were asked not to bring cheat sheets, props, or briefing books so that this could be an unscripted conversation. Again, the speaking order was determined by a random draw, and the first theme tonight is the economy.
Every poll leaders in this campaign says that affordability is the top concern of voters. So let's start with something simple. What would you do to make life more affordable for Ontarians? Ms. Horvath, you got the first 45 on this.
Thanks, Steve. It's certainly an issue that I keep hearing about no matter where I go in Ontario. People are very worried about what the future holds. Young people are giving up hope that they'll ever buy their own home. Renters are worried about the cost of rents going up. Everyday folks in this province.
What are you talking about? Oh, no, wait. Yeah, no, the renters, yeah, no, they're gonna fucking hate that. The tenants are gonna hate that, but the landlords fucking love it.
Should be able to afford everyday life. And so our plan does a lot of things to help with that. Not only make sure that we address rent controls in this province and make sure people can afford to buy their own homes, but also relieve some of the expenditures that people now are paying out of their pocket. We'll also be making sure we have a $20 minimum wage in this province, getting gas prices.
Fucking $20 minimum wage? Okay, I don't care what the rest of her fucking positions are. Fucking elect her. I'm sorry, just elect her. Like, that sounds fucking awesome. And that would help out a lot of Ontarians.
Into a place where people can afford them by getting
Ms.
that.
Horvath, thank you.
Okay, I'm
Lots
sorry.
of time to
Thank
pick
you.
up on this in a moment. Stephen Del
Absolutely.
Duca, you're next.
This is such an important point. You know, every single Saturday morning I go out to the local grocery store and buy the groceries for my household. So the prices that you see going up in your day-to-day lives, that's something that everyone across this province experiences. Earlier today, standing with members of the new Ontario Liberal team, I signed the affordability pledge that we put forward. 19 specific ideas that will save you real money and make your life easier and more affordable. For example, Buck a Ride province-wide, $1 transit fares right across this province for municipal and for provincial transit systems. We're going to take 8% off prepared meals under $20, and we're going to give our most vulnerable seniors a $1,000 top-up on their old age security pension while we bring back rent control. These
Thank
are
you,
just
Mr.
some
Del
of the
Duca.
ideas in our plan.
Very good. Mr. Ford, you're up next.
Won't hold any
Thank
of
you
it,
so
though.
much. You know, the economy means absolutely everything in this election. Folks, this is going to have a
It's kind of hard to still believe that his fucking brother did a shit ton of crack. It's wild.
clear choice. You're going to vote for parties, all three of them, that want to hike your taxes, bring back the license plate stickers, and increase the gas tax. All three of them want to do that. I'm cutting the gas tax. I'm getting rid of the license plate stickers, and we're getting rid of the Del Duca wind tolls that they put on. We're going to make sure our economy thrives. Under the previous government, we had lost 300,000 jobs. We have gained 550,000 jobs with 338,000.
Are you like including like some post-COVID numbers after that when, you know, the economy started to slowly open up again? I mean, I guess in your case, like opened up like masks off and everything. Like fucking crazy.
In the waiting, we brought back the auto sector. We're going to be the capital of electric vehicles anywhere in North America.
Wait, what?
Ford, that's the time right now. We'll have more time, obviously, to get into this. Mr. Schreiner, you're 45, please.
Yeah, affordability is the #1 concern people talk to me about, especially housing affordability, which has gotten so much worse under the current government. A whole generation of young people are wondering if they'll ever be able to afford to buy a home. That's why the Ontario Greens Masterclass Housing Affordability Strategy is about getting speculation out of the marketplace so first-time home buyers have a level playing field. You know what, Mr. Ford, if you want to make transportation affordable, people, let's get big oil out of people's pockets. You can save $2,000 a year driving an electric vehicle. So let's make it affordable for the average person to own them. And when it comes to food prices, why would we pave over the farmland that feeds us? Let's grow food locally, and let's make it affordable for people at the grocery stores.
Thanks, Mr. Schreiner.
Okay, I actually kind of like this guy.
The format now calls for direct one-on-one debate between two of you, and then we'll do the same thing again with another two of you in a moment. Stephen Del Duca and Doug Ford are in this first round. Mr. Del Duca, what do you think of his plan?
Well, first of all, I heard Mr. Ford speak just a moment ago. Again, it sounds like he's reading the script from 4 years ago, trying to fight the 2018 election all over again. Ontarians face new challenges. New challenges in part because he's walked away from his responsibility to lead, and new challenges, of course, because of COVID. We are in the midst of an affordability crisis, which is exactly the opposite of what Mr. Ford and his team said they would solve 4 years ago. That's why earlier today, I signed the 19-point affordability pledge for you. It's going to bring down the cost of transit. It's going to bring back rent control. We're going to boost the minimum wage and build in a real living wage. We're going to help seniors. We're going to do all of this and more in our fully costed and forward-looking plan. It's a plan you can count on. That's why I was proud to sign the pledge earlier today. This has to be more than just about empty words and slogans that you hear repeatedly coming from Mr. Ford and his team. People are hurting right now in this province, and Mr. Ford wants to act like he can skate right past that.
Okay,
like COVID never happened and the affordability crisis
Let's
doesn't
give him a
exist.
chance to respond. Mr. Ford.
Well, Mr. Del Duca, I just want to remind you, under yourself and the former Premier Kathleen Wynne, you destroyed this province. The economy was going downhill quicker than the Canadian bobsled team. It just continued going down. 300,000 jobs left this province. That's 300,000 people couldn't pay their rent.
I mean, that's not his problem, though. I mean, technically. Well, yeah, no, that's not even his fucking problem. It's actually your fucking fault for that. So I don't know what you're fucking complaining about. What you should be doing is you should be instating a fucking more or less band-aid solution in the form of a UBI and having, you know, fucking amenities either very fucking dirt cheap or free across the board. You know, housing, education, medicine, food, clean drinking water, shit like that, right? Like, fuck, why not? Like, fucking public transit too. Why not? And like, it doesn't matter because the fucking jobs are gonna leave either way because they find, like, I don't know, fucking someplace in Mexico to move where they can pay their fucking workers like $2 an hour and like maybe have fucking child labor too.
Mortgage, couldn't put food on the table because of your terrible policies. You want to bring back the license plate stickers as you did, and you raised it every single time. You want to increase the tolls like you did before on the 412 and 18. You actually, it was your tolls. So,
OntarioLiberal.ca.
And we're going to cut, Mr. Del Duca, we're going to cut the gas tax. You're all in favor of hiking the gas tax. You're in favor of the carbon tax. We aren't.
Oh my goodness.
We're the only party that's going to cut taxes, put more money back into your pockets.
I mean, the conservatives always say that they're gonna fucking cut taxes. They never do. In fact, they oftentimes raise taxes and, you know, fucking cut funding to very fucking important things, and such as, you know, like fucking healthcare, you know, fucking retirement homes, a bunch of other shit like that. Like, it ultimately doesn't fucking matter. They're all that they're trying to do is just gain more fucking money out of it.
We're creating an economy that is thriving right now with 550,000 jobs and 338,000 in the waiting.
All right, Mr. Del Duca.
Yeah, look, you know, there's an old saying in life: you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts, Mr. Ford. And the truth of the matter is, you need to stop reading the script that looks like it came out of the fiction section. The people of Ontario are fed up with your slogans and your empty words. They want real action. People watching at home, you can go to OntarioLiberal.ca. You can see the 19-point affordability pledge. We're going to slash the cost.
Well, let's actually take a look at that. Let's take a look at it. There it is. Let's see what they're claiming that they're gonna end up doing, but never will. Slash all public transit fares across the province to $1, which, you know, I think it should be free. You know, fucking $1, like, sure, that's nothing, but it should be free. Increase old age security by $1,000 for low-income seniors. I mean, just fucking make that free as well, you know. Make sure that they don't have to fucking put up with not having to worry about, you know, having, you know, food to eat or fucking a place to stay or some shit like that. Remove the provincial HST off of prepared foods under $20. Why not just across the board? Like, just remove that across the board. It will be good. Bring back rent control for all homes. I mean, just make universal housing. Like, it's stupid. You know, we have you have fucking fellow Ontarians dying on the streets whilst, you know, the fucking rich ass landlord who owns like 2 fucking condos is worrying about his fucking property value. Increase minimum wage to $16 an hour and introduce a regional living wage. I mean, it should be $24 an hour if you're wanting to adjust for productivity and inflation. So I don't understand why you can't do that. And plus, like, $16 an hour minimum wage is like not gonna do fuck all. Refund families $75 or $27.50 per child through retroactive childcare fees to January 1st. I mean, that's okay. I think that shit should be, the government should be helping out with a decent percentage of that. Implement $10 per day before and after school care. I mean, okay, sure, whatever. Give new parents 18 months of parental leave without cutting EI payments. Okay, that's actually good. That like 18 months parental leave, that's actually pretty good. Like that I actually agree with. Help families buy a modest electric car and energy efficient renovations. I mean, okay, sure, I guess. Like, that won't fucking matter. Just, like I said, just invest into fucking public infrastructure more and get, like, fucking awesome trains. Or, like, cable cars or some shit. Like, I'm sure Ontarians would be okay with just fucking cable cars, too. Expand tax credits to seniors. Renovating their homes and for their caregivers. I mean, sure, I guess so. Provide every worker prescription drug benefits, dental care, vision care, mental health care, and retirement savings. I mean, all that shit should be free through our healthcare system. It's pathetic that it's not. And RRSP should be, you know, I think everywhere should fucking get that. Pay our healthcare workers more. Obviously, they've had a very fucking fun 2.5 years putting up with COVID. Surprised that you haven't done that already. By scraping the wage cap, bill 124 and introducing minimum wage of $25 per hour for personnel support workers. I mean, okay, sure, I guess. Eliminate interest on provincial loans, student loans, and make OSP more generous. I mean, just fucking do student loan forgiveness, like, honestly, and just make fucking post-secondary free. Why not? Build and sell affordable new housing for the first time homeowners. I mean, why not just make it for everyone? Like, honestly. Like, are those Ontarians any less fucking valuable than, I don't know, someone who actually has, like, a little bit of fucking disposable income? Eliminating cooperation fees for new businesses and startups. I mean, okay, sure, that's fine. That has to do more with the system, so I can't necessarily say I blame them for that. Tax refunds of $75 per winter tire and 100% or $100 per studded tire in Northern Ontario. I mean, why not just do that for all across Ontario? Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Maintain elimination of plate renewal fees and tolls on highways. 412 and 418. Sure, I guess. Reduce gas tax by 5.7 cents per liter. And the fuel tax by 5.3 cents per liter for a period of 6 months beginning on July 1st. I mean, 6 months is nothing, my guy. Like, that's fucking horrible. Just move on from fucking gas at this point. Like, honestly, like, the fucking whole Russia-Ukraine situation, when it came to the fucking gas, has made things like, it just shows that fucking gas is not a reliable fucking resource to be using if it's gonna fluctuate this much. Increase the eligibility for low-income individuals and families. Lift tax credit from $38,000 to $50,000. I mean, okay, that's fair.
To public transit, we're going to make
like, he has some good stuff. He has some good stuff in there, but he also has a lot of dog shit in there as well.
Easier for you to buy meals. We're going to make it easier for you to pay your rent. We're going to boost the minimum wage. This is a positive plan to make sure going forward you have what you need.
Last word,
not
Mr.
more
Ford,
empty words from Doug
Mr.
Ford
Del
and his
Duca,
team.
you said you want to do a buck a ride for the fares. 2 years ago, you were on the podium and you were saying it's dangerous to lower fares.
So why don't
do you
you
know why
support
you're
my
saying
plan?
it's dangerous? Because
Why don't you
didn't
support my
build
plan?
any subways
Support
whatsoever.
we opened
We're
the subway
building
in
subways, the
Vaughan.
largest
Okay, friends,
infrastructure.
jumping in. That's our time for
Wait, what? You guys did not fucking build subways.
this
Total
round.
fiction.
That's
Total
our time.
fiction.
That's our time for this one-on-one. More to come, of course. We'll have another one-on-one now between Mike Schreiner and Andrea Horvath. And Mr. Schreiner,
Let's
I
go,
think you get
Andrea.
to go first. Take it away. What do you think of the NDP's plan?
Well, first of all, one of the affordability concerns that doesn't get talked about enough in this province is how the affordability crisis is affecting the most vulnerable. You know, Mr. Ford's license sticker gimmick disproportionately benefits households who can afford to own lots of cars. Doesn't do anything for a family that can't afford a car. A kind of family that might be on Ontario Disability Support Payments or Ontario Works, which Mr. Ford has frozen their rates. The Ontario Greens put forward a clear plan.
Okay, like, that's actually a very strong starting argument. Like, he's actually right about that, though. What the fuck? Okay, they want the green guy to win or the NDP woman to win.
To double ODSP rates and Ontario Works so we don't force people to live in legislative poverty. And I'm happy that Ms. Horvath listened to the fact that we were fighting for the most vulnerable in this province and amended the NDP plan. I encourage these other two leaders to do the same, because nobody, when we're in a cost of living crisis in this province, should be forced to live in legislated poverty.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Mike.
Yeah, no, he is 100% right about that. Like, I completely agree with that. Like, what?
And the best way to make sure that doesn't happen is by making sure that Mr. Ford doesn't get another term in office, because we've seen his record. There's no doubt that things were bad before Mr. Ford took office, but it's been 4 years and life's gotten harder for folks. It continues to get harder and harder. People are worried that their kids are going to have to move really far distances if they're ever going to be able to own their home.
I mean, that's the same thing, like, all across, like, Canada, though. Like, if you don't want to pay a fuck ton of money for a house, like, A, you can't live in a city, and, you know, because it's, like, way too goddamn expensive, and it's pathetic. Like, I don't give a shit if people want to live in the city. I don't give a shit if people want to live in rural Canada. Like, who fucking cares? The prices of the housing market just keep skyrocketing and skyrocketing. It's ballooning and ballooning, and it's going to burst. I know for a fact it's going to burst. It's probably going to burst within, like, the next 2-3 years. Let's be real. And unless affordable housing is an option for a vast majority of Canadians, a lot of people are going to suffer. It's going to be the 2008 financial crash all over again. Like, it just goes to show, like, every 2 years or every 20 years or whatever, you know, it's not going to be sustainable. But, you know, that's just the business cycle. What can I say? That's just how it works, right? So what if hundreds of millions of people are fucking, or tens of millions of people are put out of, like, their fucking house because they can't afford, you know, their fucking payments on their house or rent because of how fucking ridiculously sky high everything else is. Like, it's pathetic.
Own home, but in most cases we're seeing kids staying at home even longer in their parents' houses, and now that's not good for young people, and it sure isn't good for their parents, is what they tell me. So the cost of housing, getting rent control back into Ontario, getting the big oil companies under control by outlawing the gouging at the pumps, which we know is about to happen because there's a long weekend coming up. There's a lot of things we can do to relieve the pressure,
Okay, Mr. Schreiner,
but we
you wanna
have
come
to
back
make
on
sure that Mr. Ford is not reelected first.
When I knock on doors in this province, I don't care where I go in this province, housing affordability is the #1 issue people talk about. A whole generation are wondering if they'll ever be able to own a home. So many people not being able.
Unfortunately, if you know, fucking universal housing is not implemented, most young people won't own a house, and they'll most likely have to either rent for, like, their entire lives, which should not happen, or a lot of them are just gonna fucking die on the streets. And it's pathetic. I fully think that my fellow Canadians, whether they be from Ontario or Saskatchewan, or even in, like, Yukon or Nunavut, deserve to have a fair, legitimate, and good and sustainable and good form of housing. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. I think that it should be tailored to someone's needs. Like, let's say if you're a bachelor, for example, you can have, like, say, an apartment. Or if you are, say, a family of, I don't know, a family of 4 or family of 5, I think that you should be able to get a house. That doesn't mean, though, that I think that, you know, those bachelors should stay living in apartments for all they want, or for, like, all their fucking life or whatever. I think that if they want to have the option, they should be able to live in a house as well. But like, what they could be doing, especially in like Toronto or Edmonton or wherever, they could be doing, or they could be implementing the like same kind of universal housing that Venice has. I think that would be a drastically better start for a vast majority of Canadians than having to rely on the dog shit housing market that has ballooned so sky high that no one can even afford to get a house unless you're very fucking lucky. Or if you live in like bumfuck nowhere. Like, honestly, it would probably be cheaper buying a plot of land and building your own house than it is to like rent or to buy a house. And it's fucking nuts.
Able to afford their rent. That's why I'm so proud the Ontario Greens put forward what some have described as a masterclass plan in delivering the housing solutions we need in Ontario. Driving out rampant speculation, because homes should be for people, not speculators. Building more supply without paving over the farmland that feeds us.
Yeah, I want to give Ms. Horvath a chance to comment on some of these things as well.
And I'm happy that Ms. Horvath has amended her platform 3 times now to keep up with us on housing.
Ms. Horvath.
Well, again, the very most important thing is to get a chance to actually relieve the pressure on people and families. And so there's no doubt that Mr. Ford's cuts are only going to hurt more. We need to elect a government that's going to take care of the affordability of life here.
Okay, thank you. You too, Althea.
That wraps.
They actually agreed on, like, when it came to the economy, they actually agreed a surprising amount. I did not expect the Greens and the NDP to agree on so much.
Up the first one-on-one segment. So I'll next ask a question. You'll have 45 seconds each to answer, and then we'll open it up to open debate. The cost of building the proposed Highway 413 running through the Peel, York, and Halton regions is pegged at $10 billion. Is building a new highway the best way to spend $10 billion?
No. Instead of building a highway through there, they should be building a fucking rail line, a public transit rail line available for all for free. Because not only will that be like a spark for Ontarians to push for more and better infrastructure, especially public transit, but that could also ignite into like having a ton of good public transit that's available for everyone.
And Mr. Schreiner, you can begin.
Absolutely no. The $10 billion for the Highway 413 is fiscally irresponsible. It's a
Agreed.
climate disaster.
True.
It will pave over 2,000 acres of farmland.
Yep.
Mr. Ford, do you understand the food and farming sector contributes $50 billion to Ontario's economy and over 800,000 jobs? Why would you put those jobs and that prosperity at risk to save commuters 30 seconds? We need affordable homes, not long sole credit.
I mean, I would be okay with, like, you know, them doing affordable housing too, because, yeah, like I said earlier, like, everyone should have access to housing, right? Shelter. It's a basic necessity that unfortunately has been commoditized, and it's sickening to me.
Rushing expensive commutes. We should not be forcing families to drive until they qualify for a mortgage. Let's build livable, affordable, connected communities where people can live, work, and play close to home and close to the people they love.
Thank you very much.
True.
Mr. Del Duca.
So first of all, you know, I said this in my opening remarks this evening. Highway 413 makes no sense whatsoever. It's $10 billion of your money. Your money, my money, Ontario's money that's going to be spent recklessly if Doug Ford and his team have their way. It's not going to help you at all. It's actually going to make some of his richest political donors even richer. I'm the only person on this stage tonight whose community is directly impacted because this proposed highway will run through parts of my hometown of Vaughan. I'm also the person who several years ago, when I was serving as Minister of Transport...
It seems like everyone outside of the Conservatives are on board with, you know, not building this fucking highway. So, like, I can almost guarantee that anyone who has, you know, any fucking form of jurisdiction, like, outside of the Conservatives will be like, no, we're not fucking building this. It's gonna be dog shit.
Transportation at that time saw that this was a mistake, a colossal mistake that you don't need. I stopped it the first time. Doug Ford and his team brought it back for the wrong reason. If I'm elected premier in a few weeks, I will stop it once and for all and invest that money in building new schools and repairing schools everywhere.
Mr. Del Duca. Ms. Horvath.
Thanks very much. For some time now, the NDP has been clearly stating our opposition to the 413 and the Bradford bypass, and we're going to stick with that position. We're not going to flip-flop, as Mr. Del Duca has done, because the 413 is the wrong thing to do. It paves over farmland, it paves over the Greenbelt, it takes chunks out of the Holland Marsh, and what we don't need is more massive highways to mansions that nobody can afford. We need to make sure housing is available, starter housing, particularly in communities across our province. And my question to Mr. Ford is, why are your developer buddies more important than making sure people can have homes that they can actually afford in their communities?
Thank you very much.
Because they're lobbying him, that's why. And plus, like, he's a fucking Conservative. He doesn't give a shit about what happens to the Ontarian people. He only cares about making as much money as fucking possible and making as much money for his donors and investors as much as possible.
Ms. Horvath. Mr. Ford.
Well, the question is, it's costing us tens of billions of dollars a year being stuck in traffic. And the people in Vaughan, in Caledon, in Brampton, they want the 413. Matter of fact, Mr. Del Duca, it was one of your candidates that went out there and they're promoting the 413. So I'm not too sure if you're agreeing with your candidate when they said the 413 or not.
Check with the council.
Folks, we have 2.5 million people coming to this province over the next few years.
Okay, you want to know how to reduce all that fucking traffic congestion? Literally build fucking rails and bitch. Do it. Just fucking do it. I dare you. Surprise me and fucking do it. But you won't do it because you're a fucking pussy who is more concerned about, you know, having fucking dog shit highways that are not going to be maintained at all than, you know, having some fucking dope ass rails. Fuck, I swear. Fucking the other Rob Ford was way fucking better. He was actually fucking cool. Doug Ford's a loser.
We need places for them, number one, to live. We need transportation to get from one point of the province to another, making sure goods are flowing. But you're going to save.
But wait, literally have fucking rails. They can do all of that at once. You can have fucking... yeah, you can have fucking, you know... passenger carts. You can have fucking carts for business, like I mean business, I mean like exports and imports. Like, yeah, like who doesn't want that? Like that'd be fucking awesome. I swear he is more idiotic than his fucking meth addicted brother that died to, or sorry, crack addicted brother that died to crack. A crack overdose.
A half an hour each way. That's an hour that you get to spend with your family. We are going to build the 413, the Bradford bypass, and many other highways.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ford. And now we'll
You're not even going to maintain them.
Debate. And perhaps this would be a good time to talk about housing affordability as well. Mr. Del Duca, you get the first word.
Sure, fantastic. Thanks so much. So a couple of things. One is I'm not sure we're respectfully where Ms. Horvath got the issue regarding flip-flopping. I've been very clear on this since my time as Minister of Transportation all the way through. Here's an interesting thing Mr. Ford likes to ignore. Most of the municipal councils in the affected communities have now changed their position on his reckless highway. I'll also point out that the independent panel that I struck to review that highway many years ago actually reported, as Mr. Schreiner said earlier, that only a small handful of commuters would save literally seconds. Here's what an Ontario Liberal government will do with your money, those $10 billion. We're going to build 200 new schools across this province and repair 4,500 others. We're going to make sure that windows in
Okay,
your...
but like the schools don't even fucking matter if you don't have like teachers or some shit. You know, fucking make post-secondary free so that you can have people follow their fucking passions, whether it be like becoming a teacher or becoming a doctor or becoming a lawyer. Like, as well as, you know, completely rehauling the education system, but that's a whole different can of worms.
Kids' classroom can open and
Mr.
close.
Del Duca,
We're going to make sure that the air that your kids breathe, my kids and your kids breathe, the air that your kids and my kids,
Mr. Del Duca.
respectfully, if I could just finish my sentence,
the school
if I could.
backlog of repairs was
we're going to build
$15.8 billion
we're going to build
when
200
you left
new schools and
office.
4,500 schools that will be repaired. And I'll also just point out, as has been said by others so far, that we have a plan to slash transit fares down to $1. That's going to take an estimated 400,000 cars off our roads, a much better investment for you at home than Doug Ford's.
Okay, then why not go one step further? Make it free. That will get a fuck ton more cars off the road, as well as invest in fucking trains, my guy. Who doesn't want to have fucking trains? Like, have you seen the trains that they have in fucking China? Those things are dope.
Reckless Highway 413.
So
Okay,
I'd
thank
like
you.
to talk
Yes.
a little bit about rent controls. I think that was your question, was it not? About rent controls?
Housing affordability.
Housing affordability. Well, so here we are in 2022, and rent controls came off under the Harris government. And then, of course, unfortunately and disappointingly, 15 years in office, and the Liberals didn't choose to bring them back.
We did.
And now we see what's happening. We have a situation where renters are getting increases of like 30 and 40%. How can anybody be expected to come up with that kind of money? So yes, rent controls will.
I heard fucking someone I work with is like, oh yeah, no, rent's gonna be going up like 30-40 cents. I'm like, okay, that may be true for you, but that does not include a fuck ton of other Canadians who are suffering, who are going to be suffering this 30 to 40% hike, and it's happening everywhere, not just in Ontario, not just where I live. It happens everywhere, and it's ridiculous, right?
Come back under an NDP government. They should have never been taken off, nor should it have been a status quo with the Liberal government. But there's more to it than that. There are everyday expenses that people need to be able to afford, and people need a wage that you can pay the bills on. Mr. Ford took $6,000 out of minimum wage workers' pockets, and now he has Bill 124.
I mean, like, literally any capitalist party does that. That's not really surprising.
A low-wage policy that not only affects workers in the public sector, but now it's spreading into the private sector. And people are on strike for good wages because Mr. Ford's buddies figured out that he's setting a stage for a low-wage economy. And so we have LiUNA on strike. We have carpenters on strike. We have drywallers on.
And, like, to be fair, I fully support any of these fucking workers that go on strike because they want better wages. I supported I think openly on stream as well. Like, I supported the networking department that my brother works at. I 100% supported them when they went on strike. I support the carpenters that are going on strike. I support everyone that goes on strike. If it's like inherently good and reasonable, of course, like, I'm gonna support it. But like strikes and shit, like, I'll always support, because, you know, the proletariat gets fucked over all the time, and it's ridiculous.
Let Mr. Ford come in because
That's
he
your
wanted to
low-wage
address your point.
economy,
Okay, well,
Mr. Ford.
You know something, I appreciate your comments, but they're totally inaccurate. We're the only government. We had more housing starts than we've ever seen in 30 years.
Nobody
We've had
can afford the
more
housing.
rental starts than we've ever seen in 30 years.
Okay, like, even if that is true, though, who's going to be buying the fucking housing? Because it's really sky high. Like, no one can afford that, my guy. So even if that statement was true, I don't think it is, to be honest with you. Like, there's no way that, you know, anyone can afford it.
You know, Ms. Horvath and Mr. Del Duca and Mr. Schreiner, I'm the only one that wants to build.
Story.
There isn't any building
The
or
question
any
is
building
who you-
development that
but Mr.
you
Ford,
aren't against.
The question
you
is,
vote
who do you
no
want to
against
build for?
Absolutely
You don't want to build for
everything.
hardworking families in this province. You want to line the pockets of your political
you want
donors.
to talk about the hardworking
You do.
men and
This is
women
fucking
that build?
awesome.
You know, Ms. Horvath, for years, the union supported you. Well, guess what? The Boilermakers don't support you. Leona doesn't support you anymore, and the electrical workers don't support you. You've lost touch. You're out of touch with the hardworking men and women.
I think you need to look
this-
in the
this
mirror, Mr.
province.
Ford.
When
Is that a
the
touch is-
trade
is
unions
that a
are
touch
supporting
is a
us for the first
premier
time,
who's
they know
in
we're
it?
going to get it done,
Okay, what
and
touch
we're
is
going
a
to spend
premier
money
who's
on
in
it.
it?
Doug Ford is doing the fucking Donald Trump. He's talking over everyone. Oh, this is fucking awesome.
Structure. That's why they're supporting us. They don't believe in you any longer.
In it for his
You-
budget.
I think I need a little time here.
That's what it's all
Mr.
about.
Ford says he wants to build. His own budget predicts that housing starts this year will actually be 13,000 homes less than last year. What he wants to build is he wants to build a fiscally and environmentally reckless highway. Not only is this highway
wants to build a bank
413
account for
and
his buddies.
Bradford
That's what he's
bypass
building.
bad enough, but then he rerouted the highway just to be able to support a few additional land speculators who are going to get even wealthier off of this highway, putting it through a more even reckless environmentally path. The Bradford bypass. When a golf course buddy donor said, "Hey, we don't want it through our golf course," he rerouted it around them. He will
Okay, I'm fully convinced now. Doug Ford is the fucking Donald Trump of Canada, and it's fucking awesome.
roll out the red carpets for the Amazons of the world and the big box stores of the world. But when it comes to supporting local farmers, he'll pave over their farmland, hurting our economy. When it comes to protecting us from
we have an
flooding
endorsement from
and
the
the
farmers.
climate change,
That's the
he'll
difference.
pave over the wetlands that clean our drinking
fucking
water
awesome.
and protect
Mr.
us.
Schreiner, if it was up to you and up to the three of you, you wouldn't build nothing. You would
I'd
rather
build transit.
protest.
I'd build
you'd rather
transit.
protest
I'd build housing.
Than
I'd
get
build
the roads built. and
I'd
the
build
highways built.
public infrastructure.
So
I'd
listen,
build schools.
I just want to be
I'd
clear.
build hospitals.
I just want to
don't
be
like
clear. I
building
want to be
anything.
clear about something here this evening. 4 years ago, Doug Ford stood on a stage like this one. He looked into the camera and he said to the people of Ontario, if elected premier, he would make it cheaper and easier for you to buy a home. And since that point in time, the cost of a house in Ontario has climbed by nearly $500,000. The Ontario Liberal plan will build 1.5 million new homes, all forms of housing, right across this province over 10 years. We will bring back real rent control in this province to help.
I mean, you guys really won't, though. Like, it doesn't matter. You're just paying lip service to the status quo, even though I want to believe you, but I just can't. Like, I fully trust, like, fucking Mike and... What was her name? Rena.
Help renters. We're going to make sure that surplus provincial land gets unlocked and everything
Yeah.
that we sell on those lands will go to first-time home buyers who Doug Ford has abandoned for 4 straight years.
Mr. Del
Mr.
Duca,
Ford
you say
cared
you want to
about
make it
housing
affordable.
affordability,
You want to
he
hike
would
up the
actually
toll
build
roads,
affordable
which you did.
homes.
You want to hike up the gas taxes. You're 100% with the
still
carbon
making it up.
tax, which will be
Mr. Ford,
another 10
Mr.
cents,
Ford, you
which is
also
a major
promised
issue.
hydro rates
And you
would
want to
go
bring
down.
back the license plate
Promise.
stickers.
Thank you
and
very
not
much.
charge people.
We're going to cut it off there. Thank you very much. Nobody can understand you when you're all talking at the same time. We're going to change topics. Healthcare. As you know, health is
Okay, this is going to be an interesting one because last year we had fucking racism in Ontario when it came to the healthcare system. COVID has exposed just how dog shit our healthcare system is and what we need to do to improve it, as well as, you know, doctors facing burnout. Well, doctors, nurses, whoever facing burnout as well. So we will see what goes on here. It's gonna be interesting.
The largest chunk of the Ontario provincial budget. Yet, patients continue to endure very long wait times. There are calls for more doctors, for more nurses, for more hospitals. How will you meet these needs? And are you opposed to the expansion of for-profit private healthcare delivery?
Yes, if anyone says that they are not against for-profit private healthcare, I think that they should lose regardless. I know Doug Ford is going to be for it, but I'm kind of curious to see where the others stand.
Again, you have 45 seconds, and Mr. Del Duca will begin with you.
Well, like I suspect, like most Ontarians, I was shocked back in February when Doug Ford's hand-picked health minister said that his government would actually relieve the surgical and diagnostic backlog, which is at an epic level right now, by inviting the private sector, private hospitals. Those were the words that she used to come in and help clear the surgical backlog. An Ontario Liberal government will focus on building up public health care. We'll clear the surgical and diagnostic backlog within 2 years by investing $1 billion in new money to make sure that our operating rooms are running 24/7 and on weekends and evenings, that MRIs and CT scans are also boosted. We're going to bring 100,000 new healthcare workers online within 6 years, and we're going to do it within the public system by scrapping Bill 124 and truly valuing our frontline healthcare workers.
Thank you very much. Ms. Horvath.
Thanks, Althea. You know, the backlogs in surgeries are really hurting people. I met a woman not too long ago who has a knee surgery. She has to have both her knees done, and she's on a long wait list. And she's at the point she can't even go up and down her stairs anymore. And now she's looking to see whether she can afford to buy a new home in this housing market. We do need to clear those surgical backlogs, but we know that our hospitals were on their knees prior to even Mr. Ford taking office.
Yeah, like our healthcare system was even on its knees like pre-COVID, and it's ridiculous. Like even before, like pre-COVID, like even like years before that, and it's like just kind of ridiculous to me.
But then he started cutting in healthcare the minute he got elected, and then we had COVID. But privatization is not the answer. And New Democrats have always stood against privatization, notwithstanding that both Liberals and Conservatives brought privatization to home care and long-term care. We'll take it out.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schreiner.
The key to expanding healthcare capacity in this province and addressing the real wait times that people are experiencing is to invest in people. Nursing vacancies have doubled over the last 2 years. We're now short about 30,000 nurses. And when they're overworked, underpaid, and disrespected by their government through wage freezes, it's hard to recruit and retain nurses. So let's end the wage freezes that are wage.
Not just that, like it's also like very expensive to get into schooling as well to become, say, a doctor or a nurse or whatever. As well as there aren't enough hospitals for patients either. So it's crazy.
Cuts. Let's actually invest in ensuring that we have publicly funded, publicly delivered health care. Let's put people before profits when it comes to long-term care. And let's ensure that mental health is health by funding the mental health system we need through OHIP.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ford.
Well, when we came into office, our healthcare system was broken. You know,
It's even more broken now, my guy. Like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
it was on the brink. It was already stretched to the max. And we inherited hallway healthcare. Very, very clear. And everyone knows it. Our hospitals were crumbling for decades from a lack of investment. Even
They still are crumbling.
Minister of Health said you starve the healthcare system. You stop talking to the doctors. You know, we have a great relationship with the doctors and right across all healthcare workers. but we're investing back into healthcare with record numbers. We're investing over $40 billion in new hospitals, 50 projects right across every single region. We're hiring 8,000. We've already hired 8,600.
Mr. Ford, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off, but you can continue talking about your record in the face-to-face. First, though, we'll go to Ms. Horwath and Mr. Del Duca. Ms. Horwath, you can kick us off.
Thanks so much. There's no doubt that our healthcare system is in a shambles, but it is that way because of years of squeezing hospitals by the Liberal government, and people deserved better than that. The hospitals were on their knees when COVID hit. The Liberal government gave us hallway medicine, but of course, Doug Ford's cuts just hurt more. They make things worse. And
real quickly.
You know, it used to be that Canada was high, but
it is a big night in Alberta. Premier
Jason Kenney steps down as the leader of the UCP.
Kenney is stepping down as leader of the United Conservative Party after winning just 51.4% of the votes in a leadership review, a result he admitted tonight he is disappointed with. Global's Tom Vernon is with me from Calgary. Tom, technically Kenney won enough to stay on, but almost half the party members also wanted him gone. So I guess staying was untenable.
Yeah, I mean, we knew the party, it was going to be a close vote, but this was essentially a 50-50 split, 51.4 to 48.6%. Now, we'd heard a lot of discontent with the Premier's leadership over the last 18 months or so, first from the grassroots and then from a number of caucus members. And Premier Kenney told supporters in the room that, look, I was expecting more than this, and it is not enough to carry on as leader. There was the sound of shock and disappointment from his supporters in the room because of this. Now, obviously, Premier Jason Kenney knew facing caucus during a meeting tomorrow with only 50% of support in the party would have meant a tough conversation with members like Brian Jean and others who have said it is time for you to go and to find a new leader for this party. He's obviously languishing in the polls here with his popularity rating, and the party itself is behind the opposition.
What a fucking sore loser. Like, oh, people, my approval rating is down. People were crying about me being bad because I am. I'm actually kind of glad he's fucking gone, to be honest. Just dog shit.
NDP as well. So it launches a leadership contest here in Alberta for the UCP ahead of an election 1 year away.
Kenney seemed to me almost relieved in his remarks that he made after this result was announced. What did you think of the tone of his remarks tonight? And I guess we're looking at an election 1 year from now. Right now, the NDP leading in the polls.
Yeah, it was interesting. We were standing out here waiting to do another.
I do hope that the NDP do get elected. In Alberta, they definitely need them, especially after the fucking horrible conservative government that they just had with Jason Kenney.
Another live hit, and we saw the Premier's vehicle pull in, and when he got out, you can sense that there wasn't a lot of excitement. There were some disappointed faces, so I had the feeling that, maybe the vote didn't go his way. So when he made that announcement, and when you say relief, he's been under an intense amount of pressure from inside his own party, from the members of Alberta, the polling numbers that are below the NDP, fundraising numbers for the last year that have been below the NDP as well. So it's a lot of pressure on him. Not surprising he decided what he did with the amount of support. It'll be interesting to see how this leadership race goes and who brings their name forward to try and rebuild this party ahead of next election.
Yep,
Donna?
Lots of change coming in Alberta. Tom, thanks.
Well, that's honestly some good news. I honestly hope that the NDP loses, or not loses, wins over the Conservatives in Alberta. The Albertans definitely deserve it. Like, granted, they may all wear fucking, like, jean jackets and denim, but, I think I still think that they're humans too, and, should have some form of, better governance than the fucking dog shit Conservatives that have just been fucking them over.
Not better. That's why we need to invest in our hospitals. We need to scrap Bill 124, make sure that we're respecting those healthcare workers who we call heroes and then we treat like dirt, Mr. Ford. So we need to do that. We also need to get internationally accredited nurses and doctors on the front lines on our healthcare system. I met a doctor not too long ago. She lives in Buffalo. She lives in Fort Erie, and she's accredited from somewhere else, from another part of the world. And in Ontario, in Fort Erie, she cannot practice as a doctor every day. She crosses the border to Buffalo and works as a doctor. So we need to fix a broken system that's been broken for a very long time, get people return and recruit and retain healthcare workers, treat them with respect, get rid of Bill 124, scrap Doug Ford's low-wage policy, and really start providing the kind of services that people need. With more funding, 24/7, we can clear the backlog of procedures.
So look, there's no doubt about the fact that there is a really, really brutal backlog that we have both in surgeries and diagnostics in this province right now. When I said in my opening remarks tonight, people are still struggling. That's why it's so important that there's a forward-looking and fully costed plan that will address those needs. This is not an abstract talking point for me. You know, a couple of years ago, respectfully, Ms. Horvath, a couple of years ago, my mom fell and broke her hip. And I have to tell you, though she got good care at the local hospital in York Region, it was so tough for our family and for her to navigate that system. It's only gotten worse over the past couple of years, talking about the surgical and diagnostic backlog. That's why the Ontario Liberal plan will invest $1 billion over 2 years so that we have MRIs and CT scans that are running full tilt, so that we have operating rooms that are operating on weekends, evenings, all the way through to clear that backlog. Because right now, if you need...
Yeah, no, Bill 124 is complete dog shit. Just looking over it, and it's just fucking awful.
Prostate surgery in this province, only 30% are able to get it on time. That's not good enough in a province like ours. We have to repeal Bill 124.
For all kinds of procedures.
Again, Ms. Horvath, respectfully, we're not here tonight to fight the 2018 election all over again.
There are new
challenges facing
you left a wreck
people.
behind you,
Listen,
and you have to step up and take some responsibility
there
for
are
that,
new
Mr.
challenges.
Del Duca.
There are new challenges.
But where were you when all these decisions were being made? Were you out getting a coffee at the cabinet table?
Respectfully, there are new challenges facing Ontario because of how the Ford Conservatives walked away from their responsibility.
As did you.
I would rather that we would find a creative way to repeal Bill 124 to make sure internationally educated nurses and doctors are brought online.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
We're going to give Mr. Ford and Mr. Schreiner a chance to debate now. Mr. Ford, you may begin.
Well, as we're building the healthcare system and hiring thousands of doctors and nurses and PSWs, Mr. Del Duca, propped it up by the NDP and Ms. Horvath, you fired 1,600 nurses.
Why is
we're hiring thousands.
With you?
Mr. Del Duca.
Why is it private education and private healthcare with you all the time?
I know the truth really hurts, but you fired 1,600 nurses. Every region of this province, is getting a new hospital. There's 50 new projects happening right across this province. Yep. We're also paying for the nurses' tuition fees and for their books if they serve in underserved areas. We're taking care of them.
But that's not even true, though. Like, you're not doing any of that. I swear, he's like the Donald Trump of campus. Like, I swear to God.
We made sure the nurses got a $5,000 retention pay, which is, on the average, 7.6% increase. We've given the PSWs $3 permanent increase, and that far exceeds what your government did, Mr. Del Duca, propped up by the NDP. We're building, we are actually building the healthcare system that we need for the future and hiring more nurses. We have 720 doctors coming online. That takes care of 750,000 patients. We're building a med school out in Brampton. We haven't seen a med school in decades, but we're building a med school.
I don't think you've ever seen a med school, period, brother. Like, there's no shot that you've seen a med school. You probably don't even know what one looks like, my guy.
To make sure that we get more doctors into the hospitals.
Forgetting about the Northern Ontario
Mr. Del Duca, you had your chance. Let's bring in Mr. Schreiner.
Mr. Ford, have you talked to a nurse lately? Have you talked to a nurse about how disrespected they feel how overworked and underpaid and underappreciated they are, how insulted they feel being called heroes and then essentially having their wages cut by having them frozen? Mr. Ford, if you want to build capacity in our healthcare system, you have to make sure you invest in the people who deliver that care. And nurses are the backbone. They deserve to have Bill 124 gone. They deserve to have the opportunity to negotiate fair wages and fair benefits. You know, even their mental health care benefits were frozen because their entire benefit package was frozen. Have you looked somebody in the eye who lost a loved one in long-term care and explained to them that $171 million of money drained out of our long-term care system into the private pockets of shareholders at a time when people were scrambling for PPE, when seniors were trying to get access to vaccines, when PSWs were desperate to have a little bit of support to care for people and save their lives? We are better than this as a province. We can put people and care before profits. That's what it means to have a publicly funded, publicly delivered, public healthcare system. Care, people first.
Do you want to have 5 seconds
Well,
left
I
to
have
respond?
5 seconds to respond. I don't know where you're getting your figures. We're building new hospitals. They want to work in a clean environment. There's hospitals that were 80 years old.
Believe me, I'm creating jobs. I'm creating the most amount of nursing jobs ever. You've never seen the amount of nursing jobs that have been created. It's unfathomable how many jobs I've created. Believe me, trust me, just believe me.
That we're crumbling. They want to work in a clean environment, and we're building the hospitals to make sure they're taking care of hospitals.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you
to work in the hospital.
Thank you.
Leaders, let's continue on the theme of healthcare here. And I want to ask you what the most important lesson you learned was as it relates to healthcare during the pandemic, which would improve things going forward now that you have that knowledge. We have brief opening statements and then four-way debate. Mr. Ford, you get the first kick at this.
Well, I'm going to answer your question straight up. That was the most challenging time of my entire life.
Bro, like, literally anything for you is the most challenging time of your entire life. Like, yes, granted, COVID was unprecedented in, you know, a whole bunch of metrics. But I think you honestly have, like, you have problems with, like, even, like, fucking affordable housing, my guy. Like, that's not a hard problem to solve.
As premier, and I don't wish that on any premier or any administration in the future, as we inherited an absolute broken system in long-term care from multiple
even worse.
governments. It was a challenge. Did we get everything right? No, we didn't get everything right. But I'll tell you, every decision I made was with the best intention, with the best medical advice I could get at the time. But
Where
gonna fix the
Facebook?
system, we're fixing it right now until no other premier, no other administration has to go through what we had to go through. You know, there were challenging times, but I'll tell you, I'll make sure that never happens again, ever.
Thanks, Mr. Ford. Mr. Schreiner.
We need to make sure that we're adequately prepared for the next crisis, whether that crisis is a pandemic, whether it's the climate emergency, whether it's some unknown crisis.
I completely agree. We do fully need to prepare for any form of a consequential hypercapitalist reasoning, whether that be another pandemic, which could gain roots literally anywhere due to CAFOs, whether it be, you know, the climate crisis that we're facing, whether it be natural disasters, whether it be even, like, fucking violence when it comes, like, from the proletariats towards each other. We do actually need to be prepared for all of those, not just some of them. We need to be prepared for all of them. We need to have a backlog of PPE, for literally anyone. Or let's say another pandemic happens, we need to have a backlog of emergency equipment for, say, a natural disaster. Like, there's a lot of things that we have to prepare, or that we should be prepared for, but we're just not. And it's pathetic that we're not even considering on being prepared. Like, COVID was an unprecedented thing that had happened within our lifetimes. And if things continue, if we keep speeding towards the cliff, things are only going to get worse. We're going to see more pandemics. We're going to see more natural disasters. We're going to see more fucking violence. It's going to be not a fun time if, we aren't prepared for it. So there's only so much that we can actually, there is so much that we actually can do in, say, the event of a national disaster, because we don't know when those are going to happen. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be prepared for any of these circumstances. Like, we should be fully prepared for anything.
It's bearing down on us. And that means investing in people, making sure our care providers are adequately and fairly compensated. It's making sure that the most vulnerable are protected. One of the reasons so many doctors say that we should be writing prescriptions for people for them to access housing or food is because the most vulnerable who don't have access to housing or food actually put the most pressure on our healthcare system and bore a disproportionate burden during the pandemic. We need to invest in them.
Thanks, Mr. Schreiner.
Well, not just that, isn't that, even from a capitalist point of view, it doesn't make sense that you wouldn't want to have your workers fed, right? Because wouldn't you want your workers to be as productive as humanly possible and to extract the most amount of surplus labor value out of them as you can? Even that doesn't make sense. I understand that it's way cheaper for corporations to throw out a lot of the food that's past expiration date or whatever, even though a vast majority is still good, and that should be fucking given away to people who in need, which has been increasing fucking a shit ton over the last couple of years, especially after post COVID. It's going to be really fucking bad.
Schreiner, Mr. Del Duca, you're up.
I think the most important lesson that every leader should have learned during COVID, in particular in healthcare, is that you have to follow the science. You do have to listen to the medical evidence, especially when you're dealing with a public health crisis. Now, everybody watching at home knows that in February 2021, when the science table told the Ford conservatives don't reopen so rapidly and they ignored it, that made subsequent waves of COVID dramatically worse for Ontario families. And
True.
Then when he scrambled, he decided he wanted to close playgrounds and give police more powers for carding that bore no relation whatsoever to the challenge that we faced. Yes, we need to get to the bottom of why this province wasn't prepared for sure, but the way to go forward in a responsible and thoughtful way when you're dealing with healthcare crises is to listen to the science and follow it in a thoughtful way.
Andrea Horvath, your time.
Thanks. Whenever I think about what happened during the pandemic, I think about long-term care and the absolute tragedies that took place there. I think about people like Kathy Parks, who was traumatized by the death of her father in a private long-term care home, a for-profit long-term care.
And unfortunately, especially in the for-profit sectors, they don't give a shit about those people. They care about their bottom line, and anything that threatens that bottom line is not going to make them happy. And it's fucking crazy. The amount of people that have passed away due to the privatization of long-term care, the fucking burnout from home care workers, the lack of PPE for home care workers and residents has been, and etc., has been pathetic. Like, so many people had to die because they didn't want to spend the money or give the resources required in order to keep those people safe, as well as their fucking employees.
Care home who basically refused
Because they don't
to
fucking care.
give him the care that he needed. Lots of families watched as loved ones, as the armed forces showed us when they arrived, dying in long-term care homes of malnutrition and dehydration. Our seniors should have never gone through that, nor should our government have
No, for the record, no one should have to go through that. No one should have to go through starvation. No one should have to be homeless. No one has to go through dehydration. No one should have to go through a lack of medical attention. Like, it's all like pathetic that, you know, we still have fucking communities that in Canada, like across Canada, that still fucking do that. Like, it's pathetic.
had put a law forward so they couldn't sue and get justice to protect their buddies in private long-term care.
Thanks, Ms.
A lot more to
Horvath.
say about this.
Okay, we have 5 minutes now of open debate. Mike Schreiner, you get the first kick at it.
I want to talk about the fact that we need new solutions to old problems when it comes to our healthcare system. We need to invest in people, investing in the people who provide care, but also investing in the people who need that care. The biggest driver of stress on our healthcare system is actually poverty. Costs our province 30.
He's not even wrong about that. Like, poverty is such a big problem when it comes to it, because when it comes to poverty, it's going to have a shitload of crime. It's going to have like, it's going to cause a shit ton of crime, or what we consider crime, petty theft and whatever the fuck. And, you know, we shouldn't have fucking people, you know, going hungry or going homeless when we have, you know, the when we have the necessary resources to give them, but we don't want to give them to them because it's not profitable. It's pathetic.
$33 billion a year. There are literally doctors and nurses saying we should be writing prescriptions to address poverty if we want to take pressure off of our healthcare system. Let's talk about housing. University Health Network says we should be writing prescriptions for housing, because one of the biggest drivers of people going to hospital is they don't have safe or affordable housing. So let's talk about ways that we can prevent illness and promote health by investing in
Let's
people.
do that.
Yeah, sure.
1, 2, 3. Go ahead.
So as I was saying earlier, look, when you go...
I never thought I would agree with the Greens so much. Like, no, he's been spot on about, like, literally everything. Like, I'm actually genuinely surprised. Like, usually the Greens are, like, fucking dog shit on, like, every single front outside of, like, a couple, like, renewable energy things, but, like, outside of that, they're, like, completely dog shit across the board. But he's actually not too bad.
Go through the kind of public health crisis that we have.
I don't think he'll win, though.
The science, you need to know that, as has been mentioned earlier, mixing the private sector and care, in particular elder care, is wrong. But we also see that with Doug Ford and his team and how they want to clear the surgical backlog. On our Ontario Liberal plan, we'll invest $1 billion over 2 years to clear that backlog. We're going to bring on 100,000 new healthcare workers. We're going to repeal Bill 124 so nurses and personal support workers get the support and the compensation that they deserve to have. We'll continue to invest in physical buildings, including expanding community health centers, building 15 new CHCs right across the province of Ontario.
Ms. Horvath,
but
you
it really
okay with
does
all
boil
that?
down to public
You okay
versus
with all
private.
that, with this checklist?
Well,
Doug Ford, who
here's,
prioritizes private all the
Here's what
time.
I think that we should be thinking about when it comes to our healthcare system. We saw what happened with COVID-19. We should have learned a long time ago that you can't squeeze hospitals. You can't fire 1,600 nurses like the Liberals had done. If I was in charge during the COVID-19 pandemic, I would have made sure people had paid sick days to prevent the virus from spreading. I would have taken care of the kids in schools, made the classrooms smaller.
And it's kind of crazy to me that they didn't have paid sick days. Like, I understand that, you know, you want to make sure that they're all, like, that you have as many personnel as possible. But at the same time, like, they are part of the working class and they should have paid sick days for when they're sick. They should not be forced to come into work when they are not feeling well. It's pathetic to me that that happened.
To avoid the spread
It's very petty.
back into community. I would have made sure that an iron ring was put around seniors in long-term care. How shameful that there was no protection for seniors in long-term care. And instead, this government protected their buddies by preventing them from being sued.
Let me get Mr. Ford to comment on that. Hang on, we should let him, you've made an allegation, we should let him respond to that. Mr. Ford.
I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges when it first started was the PPE. Mr. Del Duca, you left the cupboards empty. I'll never forget it. Them calling me up and saying we have 5 days of PPE.
I mean, you had 2 years to prepare for that, my guy. It's not just his fault. Like, granted, yes, he has been fucking horrible, but, like, you can't just shift blame to him. Like, you had 2 years to restock those cupboards, so there's no reason on why you shouldn't have. Because, to be honest, like, I knew that there was going to be a fucking, like, once I actually looked into it, I'm like, yeah, we're probably due for pandemics at some point, because we have one, like, once a century. And we could probably get more. We could probably see another one in our lifetime.
Because the Liberals didn't restock it. And right away, I gave a shout out to industries, and within 2 days, 26,000 companies came online on our portal. And now we'll never rely on any other jurisdiction, any other country in the world for PPE. 3M is manufacturing millions and millions of N95 masks. We have surgical masks. We have gowns. We have face shields. Okay. We have everything that will never have to be in that.
Okay, but that ultimately doesn't matter when you released all the fucking restrictions, you know, that were put in place to help protect people. Like, that's so idiotic.
Hang on, Stephen Del Duca first. Stephen Del Duca.
There was a criticism there. Look, there's no doubt in my mind the people of Ontario have an exceptional capacity to rise to the occasion of a challenge. But I want to understand better. I think people at home do as well. Why, when the science table told you in February 2021 to not reopen so rapidly, why did you choose to do so? And then why did you tell little kids like my own daughters that they couldn't go to playgrounds and that police should have more power to card, trample on charter rights indiscriminately? Why was that your solution in the midst of that moment of crisis? Why? Why then? Why then?
Mr. Del Duca, as I said earlier on, folks, was everything perfect? No, it wasn't perfect. But if there was an issue, I'll get up there. I made the change. I apologize. But
playgrounds
let's just talk about that for a minute,
and police.
Mr. Del Duca. For 2.5 years, literally 24/7, I was working on this pandemic. It's easy to sit back from the sidelines when you didn't have to make the tough decisions that I had to make and criticize. You have the easiest job if you just sit there and criticize.
Honestly, he probably would have done a lot better than this fucking Donald Trump wannabe looking ass. Like, granted, he's a fucking thumb, but he still probably would have done, like, a significantly better than Donald Trump wannabe.
Mr. Ford, respectfully, Mr. Ford, respectfully, this is the job that you signed up for 4 years ago. You asked for people to support you 4 years ago. You ran to be premier. You must accept responsibility.
Very good. You've both made your points. You've both made your points. Can I please have? We need the last 25 seconds. Mr. Del Duca, please. Can I please? Excuse me. Can we please save 20 seconds for Andrea Horvath to respond?
So I did want to say that one of the things we have to acknowledge is that there's still a lot of people suffering from COVID in terms of mental health challenges, people that lost their businesses. Mr.
As well as, those that are still suffering from COVID, the ones that or the people who have caught COVID still, like they're still out there. It's not just magically gonna go away because fucking parade away or some other bullshit. Like that's not how that works.
Ford.
Yes, China has done a way better job containing COVID, but I still don't fully agree with their methods. I think the zero COVID policy is just complete dog shit, and they should be focusing on vaccinations. But they've done way better than we fucking have ever. We did good wave 1, and then wave onwards, it's too hard. Who cares?
Got the calls from Walmart and they did well, but small businesses lost a lot. People lost loved ones. We have to take care of folks' mental health in this province, and then we have a plan to do exactly that.
That's
with
healthcare?
mental health through your OHIP card, not
That's
your credit
healthcare.
card.
Now we got to talk education. The province's 2 million elementary and secondary students have been through an unprecedented last 2 years. I don't have to tell any of you. Can we get opening statements from the 4 of you on what you would do to improve education in Ontario? Opening statements, then we'll get into more debate. Mike Schreiner, you get to go first here.
Make education free across the board. I think that would make a lot of people happy, regardless of what their political stance is, regardless of what their background is, regardless of what their religion is, etc. Of course that will make people happy. You'll have people going to become doctors, nurses, lawyers, teachers, engineers. They'll be able to follow their passions and not have to worry about paying off a ridiculous amount of student loan debt. And for those that have had to pay off student loan debt and everything, and that are currently facing that, they should have student loan forgiveness.
We need stability and more investment in public education. I mean, our students have been through 2 tough years with the pandemic. But I want to remind everyone it's actually been 3 years of instability, because the year prior to the pandemic, thank goodness, students and educators fought back against Mr. Ford's efforts to increase class sizes and bring on mandatory learning. If the last 2 years have ever taught us anything, it's we need lower class sizes and no mandatory online learning. So let's make the investments to lower class sizes. Let's make the investments to ensure that our students learn in classroom. And let's make the investments to deal with
the Denmark approach.
Backlog. Mr. Ford wants to build a highway. Greens want to fix schools.
That's time. Doug Ford, your chance is next.
Well, the purpose of our education system to make sure we prepare the kids for the jobs when they get out of school, jobs of the future. And we change the curriculum to make sure that we focus on financial literacy until kids can understand how to create a budget, how to look at a mortgage. We need real life and job.
That doesn't matter if they don't have fucking money to do any of that.
Skills when they get out until they have the upper hand. They have the best jobs and the best ability to go out there and fill those jobs. We're short 338,000 jobs right now because we've created the environment for the economy to be thriving right now. But we want to make sure that the kids understand the opportunities out there. And again, no matter if it's coding, mathematics, engineering,
Okay, Mr.
that's
Ford,
what we're focusing.
More time to discuss in a moment. Mr. Del Duca, your time.
There is perhaps no other place where Mr. Ford's record has been more appalling than in publicly funded education. This is not spin. This is not some sort of script that he's reading that someone else wrote for him. This hits my household directly because my daughters attend publicly funded schools in our home community. The Ontario Liberal plan will bring back an optional grade 13. We're going to shrink class sizes to 20 for elementary and secondary, hiring 10,000 new teachers to
Honestly, I'm not even sure how I feel about grade 13 anymore. Like, at first I was like fully in support of it, but now I honestly don't even know if it would be a good idea or not. I think that having access to free post-secondary would be far much more substantial and impactful than having a grade 13, to be honest.
Make that happen. We are going to cancel Highway 413, as we said from day one. We're going to invest that in repairing and building new schools. 5,000 new special education professionals to help every child, yours and mine, be set up for success. Doug Ford does not value publicly funded education. Ontario Liberals do.
Thanks, Mr. Del Duca. Andrea Horvath.
Thanks very much, Steve. You know, the pandemic certainly was hard on kids and schools. I agree with what Mr. Schreiner has said. But let's face it, there were cuts to education before the pandemic hit. Mr. Ford was firing 10,000 teachers to the point it was so awful that kids were actually protesting outside of their own schools. There were 20,000 kids on the lawns of Queen's Park to try to save their public education system from this premier. And kids deserve so much better than that. What we've seen...
I mean, it's kind of pathetic when, you know, kids have to fucking pick up the mantle because of how fucking horrible fucking adults are when it comes to making decisions. Like, they honestly seem a lot fucking smarter than a lot of the clowns we have in office.
Of course, since COVID is a doubling down on the lack of commitment to public education. Kids are in classrooms with mittens on and coats in the wintertime. There's a repair backlog. We have to address all of those things and make sure
Thanks,
our class
Ms. Horvath.
sizes are smaller.
Thank you very much. Now we do one-on-one. This is Stephen Del Duca and Mike Schreiner's turn. So, gentlemen, over to you. You get the first word.
So, as I was saying just a moment ago, you know, when I think about what's taken place in my own household over the past 2 years, as my daughters, who are in grade 9 and grade 5, have struggled, like kids right across this province, forced to learn through screens. By the way, as was pointed out a second ago, Mr. Ford wants to continue with mandatory online learning. Ontario Liberals will get rid of that. They were isolated from their friends. Their teachers, their frontline education workers were not supported. And as has been pointed out, this unraveling and undermining by the Ford Conservatives of public education started shortly after taking office. And why? Why? Because time and time and time again, the Conservatives, including this version, under Doug Ford, want to emphasize private over public. Think about this for a moment. When schools like the school that my daughters attend were looking for rapid tests during COVID, we learned, as many public schools struggled to get those tests, that thousands of private schools were getting them with help from this government. That tells you all you need to know, whether it's...
I don't know what you're saying, brother. Those kids are more important than the ones that are going to public school. You know, they're gonna grow up to be super rich, gonna create jobs.
Private hospitals or private schools, the Ford Conservatives cannot help themselves.
Let's hear from Mike Schreiner.
They want to privatize and put you and your families at
Mr.
risk.
Del Duca, let's hear from Mike Schreiner.
Yeah, absolutely. They want to put you and your families at risk. And the question is, you know, what did we learn from COVID? And I'm going to ask Mr. Del Duca what he's learned from when the last Liberal government was in power. The repair backlog got worse. Matter of fact, it got billions of dollars worse. 227 schools were closed, mostly in rural communities. In many of those communities, the school was like the lifeblood of the community, especially in those single school communities. Teachers' bargaining rights were taken away. They took the government to court and won. And so I'm wondering, Mr. Del Duca, have you learned from what the last Liberal government did to public education in Ontario? In the same way we need to learn, in the same way we need, give me a second, please. In the same way we need to learn from the pandemic, I believe the Liberals need to learn from the lack of investment they made in public education the last time they were in power.
Mr. Del Duca.
Very proud to respond to this particular question again, because this one hits home for me. Again, I'm not talking in an abstract way. This is not a key message for me or a script written by someone else. This is literally about Talia and Grace, my daughters, and the 2 million kids who attend publicly funded schools across Ontario. I think Mr. Schreiner and I, we share a lot in common on public education. Can I just say, in 2018, when Liberals left office, there were actually more public schools in the province of Ontario than there were in 2003 when Liberals first came to office. Regardless, because I'm not here to fight the 2018 election over again, because kids like mine face new challenges in this province. That's why Ontario Liberals will cap class sizes, bring back the optional grade
Let me
13,
save 15 seconds
and repair schools by canceling
15
Highway
seconds for
413.
Mike Schreiner, please.
Yeah, the Ontario Greens will invest in public education. We will make the investments needed so your children thrive in public schools.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We have our second one-on-one now, and it's Doug Ford against Andrea Horwath, or with Andrea Horwath, if you prefer. Mr. Ford, you get the first word.
Well, we're going to invest in jobs of the future, as I said. There's nothing more than a parent wants than their kids to graduate, get a good paying jobs, in thriving sectors right across this province that they never had under the Liberals and NDP. The Liberals and NDP closed 600 schools. That's 600 schools were closed across the province.
Wait, what?
We're building 100 new schools. We're investing over $14 billion.
So, even if hypothetically that is true, like, you know, they closed 600 schools, which I don't believe. His reaction to that is, okay, 600 schools were closed down. Let's build 100 schools. I don't think your math adds up.
Dollars in creating an environment.
I think
for kids
he
to go
missed
into. Brand new schools with the
addition
greatest technology and the
or
HVAC
differences.
systems. That's what we're focusing on. We're getting our kids ready for jobs of the future, no matter if it's in the tech sector or the auto sector, that we're going to need a lot of jobs in the auto sector.
Let's hear what Ms. Horwath has to say about that.
Thanks so much, Steve. One of the things that Mr. Ford refuses to acknowledge is the cuts and the chaos that he brought to our public education system. That's why we saw kids protesting at Queen's Park and outside of their schools. And now after COVID, we know that parents want quality, well-funded public education, not online learning that Mr. Ford can then privatize. We have parents who have told me stories, people have told me stories, that their kids have actually lost their spark, that their personalities have changed. So we need to get our class sizes smaller. We need more teachers. We need more supports in our schools to help those kids to get back to where they should be. We should be investing in public education because kids deserve to be able to find their gifts and excel and go on to build a great life in this province. Yes, you know, there's one thing I agree with Mr. Ford. SHOP needs to be back in our schools, but it needs to be back in our public school system, not privatized so that your buddies can make some money off of it.
Mr. Ford?
Well, we've invested. I'm glad we're agreeing on skilled trades, even though any of the trade unions don't support Ms. Horwath.
So a lot of the trades are actually fairly important. So a lot of the pencil pusher jobs are gone, and a lot of the manufacturing jobs are gone because of automation. A lot of people are going to be turning to trades because, for the most part, those jobs are going to be needed either way, and whatnot. But a lot of those wages also don't pay enough, especially not in our current socioeconomic climate. So, yeah, no, they definitely do need to bring back a lot of those optional classes, but you know, they should be in public schooling, as well as they should be increasing the spending of public schooling and making post-secondary free. Man, I'm getting tired.
Because they don't believe in her. They don't believe in the Liberals. But we're investing $1 billion into the skilled trades, and we're starting in high school. It's absolutely critical that we get the kids involved at a very early age. And on the
Okay, but like high school isn't early enough. If they want to do like fucking, I don't know, like shop in like grade 7, I pursue that throughout like all of fucking school, I say let them. Can't just focus on like high school students. You also forget about the junior high students, the elementary school students. Like, silly.
The funding side, we're hiring 3,000 new teachers this year alone. We're increasing spending by $600 million, and we're up 9%.
This is their time.
And
This
we're
is
up
their time.
9% from when the Liberals were in power. But you know, folks, what I'm keyed on, making sure they have real life job skills when they get out of school, that they can find a good job, that they can find an affordable.
Except a lot of those jobs, like, a lot of jobs are fairly competitive. So it ultimately doesn't even matter. They have the skills or not. They probably ain't gonna end up fucking working at McDonald's.
Home
and the way that they
live here and thrive.
What you're missing is the way that they get exactly that. The way that they get exactly that is by having teachers in the classroom and the one-on-one support that they need and the mental health supports that they need to come through, to recover, I guess I'm saying, from what happened during COVID. But your cuts and your chaos destabilized our education system significantly. And ask any parent and they'll tell you the same thing. You can't cut to a better education system. You just can't.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of this segment. Althea.
Still on education. In some parts of the province, violence in schools is on the rise, with students bringing in weapons. Education workers also report an alarming number of violent incidents directed at them. What will you do to improve school safety? And we'll begin with Ms. Horvath.
Someone says to put fucking security guards in, I'm gonna lose.
It's a really important question. I've been hearing a lot of heartbreaking stories around both of those pieces, violence in the schools and violence towards education workers. And we're not going to be able to fix what's broken in our schools with more cutbacks. We have to make the investments. We have to provide the supports. We have to make sure kids are able to get their needs met. I mean, we have a province that, I don't know how somebody does this, but this government promised they were going to help kids with autism and then pulled the rug out from under those families and doubled the wait list. We need resources in our schools. We need supports for our kids, and that will help us to ensure that our classrooms are safe and that they're safe workplaces also for education workers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Del Duca.
Look, it's a really serious problem. The classrooms that I visited, the classrooms that I hear about, the classrooms that my daughters attend, it's not like a generation ago when I was growing up. So we need to make the right kind of investments. So for example, in the most recent Conservative budget, when Doug Ford chose to cut $1.3 billion at this stage out of public education, that was a reckless mistake, The Ontario Liberal plan will hire up 5,000 new special education professionals. That's more than one for every school in this province. 1,000 new mental health professionals to help target at-risk youth in our publicly funded schools. And we will cap class sizes at 20 in both elementary and secondary to give teachers the support and the space that they need to do their job.
Thank you very much, Mr. Del Duca. Mr. Ford.
Well, we're going to work with the whole community. That's where you go right down to the root cause. Work within the community, work within the schools, give these kids support that they haven't had. And Mr. Del Duca, you mentioned about mental health. Our government has spent more on mental health in schools than any other time in Ontario's history. We increased spending by 420%. That's a massive amount. We're investing $3.8 billion into mental health, but we're going to be there to support the kids. We're going to be there to support the families to make sure they don't have these challenges in schools. We're going to make sure we invest the proper amount of money to help the schools and the families.
But you literally don't care, though. You fire that go on strike. You cut funding to public schooling. Cut funding to fucking people who have autistic kids and have necessary resources to take care of. Shit job, my God.
In the communities.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ford. Mr. Schreiner.
Yeah, I just don't see how cutting $1.3 billion from the education budget invests the kind of money we need to invest in schools. I've heard from so many teachers, and I've also heard from so many desperate parents whose children need support. That's why we need to increase funding for educational assistants, and those who work with children with special needs. And I want to say to Mr. Ford, when it comes to mental health, 28,000 young kids on a mental health wait list in Ontario right now. Average wait time is 18 months. Sometimes it's as long as 2.5 years. I met a young person the other day who was on suicide watch and had to wait a year to get help.
Sad.
Ontario Greens will make a commitment to reduce those wait times to 30 days.
30 days? Like, that's still not soon enough, though. Like, should be trying to take care of that as soon as possible, because who's to say that they're still going to be around 30 days, right? Like, I fully agree with most of the stuff that he's saying, but like, that's one thing that I do not agree with. Is that no, you should be trying to reduce that wait time down to like minutes, not fucking 30 days.
Thank you very much. We now move on to open debate. And Ms. Horvath, you can kick things off.
Thanks. This is something, of course, that we've also committed to, because it shouldn't be the case that young people can't get the mental health supports that they need. But that has been a long time problem.
They should also be making mental health services free too. That would drastically help a lot of Canadians that are struggling.
In our province. I met a young person in Paris, Ontario, in the riding of Brant just last week, and he told me a heartbreaking story of being bullied at school, and he didn't get the help that he needed, and he didn't get it as he was a teenager, and he didn't get into young adulthood, and 2 years ago he attempted death by suicide. It was a heartbreaking story, and he talked to me about it because he wanted to be the voice of so many other people that are having that kind of mental health pain, and we need to address it. We need to make sure that we realize that mental health pain is just as serious as physical health pain, which is why we have a plan to get mental health services covered through your OHIP card, as I mentioned earlier. But cuts to education, my question to Mr. Ford is, who cuts education during a global pandemic? Apparently, Mr. Ford thinks that that's okay to do. And I think the rest...
Okay, so as someone who has dealt with suicidal thoughts, and if I actually had the right people to talk to, the right services provided, there is a good chance that I probably had dealt with that the first time that I was going through that, instead of having it off and on for 3 to 5 years. So I understand like the struggles that a lot of those people have to go through, as well as I understand what they need. Okay. So they need is a trusted individual to talk to. They need good, trusted services that they can turn to when they're not doing too great mentally, as well as having it free, not charging anything for it. That is something that is very important to me, very close to my heart, considering that I have dealt with it.
Rest of us disagree.
Let's give a chance to Mr. Ford to respond, and then the others.
Well, I'll just cut to the numbers, folks. Go online and look at our budget, and you can read our budget. That we're actually you'll find that they're misleading you. You're going to find the facts are that we're spending 9% more, a $26 billion budget. We're actually investing $14 billion into new schools, and building 100 new schools. But we're geared on making sure that we're preparing the kids for jobs of the future, no matter if it's the tech sector, as I said, or the automotive sector, or every single sector out there is hiring. Because we've created the environment for the economy to thrive and prosper and grow.
No, you
When
haven't.
the economy thrives, prospers, and grows, so do communities. We're building new schools all over this province,
Okay,
folks.
thank you very much.
Only the 100. You only built the 100 allegedly.
Make
Mr.
sure
Ford, let's
we
bring in Mr.
send
Del
our
Duca.
kids out
So
there
again-
to have the upper hand
Again,
when they apply for jobs.
I said just a moment ago that classrooms today are an awful lot different from what they were like when I was younger, and I know from what Mr. Ford was younger. But when I listened to him talk tonight, and I listened to him talk about education over the past 4 years, it begs the question whether or not he's actually spoken to a teacher or a student or a parent outside of photo ops in
No, because they would absolutely destroy him when when it comes to that. Like I'm sure that even like some random guy out in like rural Ontario would fucking destroy this Trump wannabe.
in schools.
Actually, I have.
Because if you
A
have,
lot of them.
you will hear about anxiety, mental health challenges, that feeling of abandonment, because you have cut, because you have undermined. But let me just also talk about post-secondary, the other part of education where there are serious mental health challenges too. When Mr. Ford came to office, he made it dramatically less accessible and far less affordable for young students to go to college or university in this province. Horribly backward economic policy. And yet he's here tonight bragging like he deserves a medal or a pat on the back about supporting public education. Your record on public education, Mr. Ford, is an embarrassment.
I don't know what you're talking about, brother. He's done a great job. He's been doing a great job, brother. He's been keeping all those unwanted people out of the education system. They could be stealing jobs from deserving people, right? Oh man. Fucking Doug Ford. Man.
And you should be ashamed of yourself for what you have done to kids across this province, like mine and the hundreds of thousands of others that just want a premier who understands that you have a moral obligation to get public health care right, and you, sir, have failed this province.
Mr. Ford, would you like to respond? And then we'll give Mr. Schreiner a chance.
Well, I'd love to respond. You know, I'm proud of our record on education. Matter of fact, I think we have the best Minister of Education we've ever had. He's invested billions of dollars to make sure he's getting the kids ready for jobs of the future. Under your administration, they didn't have to worry about jobs because you ran every single job out of the province. The 300,000 jobs left under your watch. You want to talk about embarrassment? You destroyed this province in every area, no matter if the economy, hospitals, long-term care. You destroyed this province by the NDP.
Thank you very
That's
much.
what really
Mr.
happened.
Schreiner, please come in.
If Mr. Ford's going to talk about the jobs of the future, then why is he so actively hostile about the jobs of the future? The bottom line is climate action is job action. Over the next decade, 65 million jobs will be created globally in the new climate economy, worth $26 trillion. Is Ontario going to lead that? Are we going to create those jobs? Or is Mr. Ford going to continue to be active hostile to them? For example, renewable energy. He canceled all the contracts. That's where most of the energy investment is going globally. Ontario can lead. When it comes to retrofitting our homes, he canceled all the programs to help people save money by saving energy, that we could ramp up jobs for people in the trades and building construction sectors. When it comes to supporting local food, he wants to pave over the farmland that's actually going to grow that local food. Let's invest in the jobs of tomorrow. The Ontario Greens have made a commitment. Free tuition for 60,000 young people to be trained up and receive apprenticeships in the fastest growing markets of the new climate economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schreiner. Let's give the last word to Ms. Horvath.
I'm glad that that we're talking. You brought it back to education and started talking about what we need to do there. Under this government, we've had the only university that had to close its doors because he didn't want to fund them. That's a pretty shameful thing. We know that this government doesn't support public education. They don't support our post-secondary education system, and we have kids that are having debt the size of mortgages from their education. We can fix that.
Okay, thank you very much for this.
And they should relieve it too.
The theme of leadership. In Ontario, across Canada, and elsewhere, politics is becoming more divisive and confrontational. Hate crimes are rising.
I mean, like, it's only becoming divisive and confrontational from like a bunch of dumbass fucking Nazis, like and white supremacists. That's all that's fucking happening. Like, I don't think the crusty ass anarchist gives a shit on what fucking Doug Ford's stance is on, like, I don't know if we should have a fucking nurse in the hospital. Oh, it's due to the fact that, you know, a lot of these fucking white supremacist fascists are just, you know, fucking growing in numbers because no one actually wants to do anything about it.
What should be done to address this? Why are you the leader to foster unity rather than division? Mr. Ford, we'll begin with you.
Oh, this is
Well,
going
I
to be
think
great.
in the past couple of years, if it's taught us anything, is leadership matters. And you know, during the pandemic, I had to work with 444 mayors and wardens that we got along very well. I had to work with 12 other premiers and a federal government of all different political stripes. But we all worked together. No matter if it was the pandemic,
you,
or
though?
building the largest subway system anywhere in the country, or actually building electric arc furnaces in the Sault Ste. Marie and Hamilton in your own backyard that both of you voted against. That's like taking 1 million cars off the road. But we worked with the federal government. We worked with them to create a thriving auto sector in all different areas, no matter if it was Windsor or Oshawa or Oakville.
Mr. Ford, I'm sorry to cut you off,
Ingersoll.
but you're out of time.
Okay.
Mr. Schreiner, your turn.
We absolutely have to address the rising levels of hate in our society and the rising levels of toxic hyperpartisanship in our politics. And that takes strong leadership. It takes leadership that's willing to work across party stripes.
You want to know how to solve that? Just fucking kick the conservatives out and never give them any political power again. Like, the liberals are probably the furthest right we should be voting. And like, the liberals are also pretty fucking dog shit too. Like, I honestly think anything liberal or left would probably be beneficial. Just get rid of the fucking Conservative Party. No one will fucking care. Address the socioeconomic conditions of every Canadian, regardless of if they're rural, if they're urban, if they're black, if they're white, if they're indigenous, if they're Asian. Whether they're fucking Christian, Muslim, fuck, like, who cares? Address whether they came here legally or illegally. Fucking cares. Address the material conditions for each and every Canadian that was either born on the soil or came here, regardless if it was legally or illegally. That is how you're going to solve a lot of the fucking problems. But unfortunately, I don't think that will be happening anytime soon.
To get it done. And I believe that's the kind of leadership that I've brought to Queen's Park and that Greens have brought to provinces across this country, whether it's in British Columbia or PEI. I helped lead the first bill in Ontario history that all 4 parties supported. And I am going to work hard in this next parliament to ensure that we can get all 4 parties behind the Our London Family Act to combat
Thank you very much,
Islamophobia.
Mr. Schreiner. Ms. Horvath.
Thanks very much. I agree on the Our London Family Act. I was really honored to work with the National Council of Canadian Muslims after that horrifying terrorist attack that happened in London. I don't know why the current government or why Mr. Ford's government decided not to support that legislation, but we need to take seriously the rising hate, the Islamophobia, the anti-Semitism, the anti-Black racism. We see too much hate in this province. That's why we pushed the last government to put in place the Anti-Racism Directorate. We're going to have a minister responsible for anti-racism, and we're going to do the work necessary to reduce the hate, reduce the toxicity, and try to give people a good life here in this province.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Bill 86, our London family, working together to combat Islamophobia and hatred. 20. Kind of a mouthful. It's actually pretty That's something that everyone here should support. Instead of Doug Ford.
Mr. Del Duca.
Well, thanks so much. One of the most important responsibilities that a premier has in our province is to work hard to unify all regions, all peoples, and frankly, even all political parties. During this pandemic, I tried my best to lead by example. I reached out to all three of the other party leaders on paid sick leave, on the vaccine certificates and mandates, and on dealing with what we saw in terms of the Omicron variant and how it was impacting our hospitals. I will say, Ms. Horvath and Mr. Schreiner and their teams participated. Every time Doug Ford and his team were invited to actually be collaborative with us, they chose not to. An Ontario Liberal government will pass the Our London Family Act. We will appoint a standalone minister for anti-racism, and we will work across party lines to deliver real progress for you.
Sorry to cut you off, but we are now entering the face-to-face between yourself and Ms. Horvath, and you can begin.
Well, as I was just saying a second ago, I think it is so critically important to make sure that you do find creative ways to work across party lines. We saw some examples of that over the past.
I hate this fucking, like, reaching across party lines shit. Like, either nothing's gonna get passed, or it's gonna be so inconsequential that it won't even fucking matter unless you work with, like, the NDP. Or maybe in this case, the Greens. But outside of that, like, it doesn't fucking matter because nothing's gonna happen, right?
2 years. I will say that it was a missed opportunity that Mr. Ford and his team did not invite the opposition leaders into more discussions to play a constructive role. I think in my time as leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, there were 2 meetings that took place. I think we need to see more of that. I think about the climate crisis. Part of our plan is to make sure that if elected June 2nd, we will appoint a multi-party committee of cabinet on the climate crisis to make sure that we are prepared and to make sure that that issue, which truly must transcend partisanship, is actually dealt with in the most collaborative way. So bringing unity to the province, having a standalone anti-racism directorate or a minister responsible for the anti-racism directorate, and bringing people together is something that is core to Ontario Liberal values.
Thanks for the opportunity to respond to that a little bit. I spent a lot of time in the legislature when Mr. Del Duca's team was in office, and we tried very hard to get the Liberal government of the day to work with us to make bills better, but very rarely would we ever succeed in getting that level of collaboration. So it's great that Mr. Del Duca has seen the light as to how other parties can help make things better if they only, welcome the conversation. But we have some serious problems in this province when it comes to division. And we were able to successfully get the Liberals to put the anti-racism directorate in place, but Mr. Ford has defunded it for all intents and purposes. We need to be proactive. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reduce the hate, to reduce the violence, and to make sure that people know that they're valued here, that they're welcome here, that we will protect them when they're. I mean, nobody should go into a masjid, their mosque, and have to look over their shoulder for fear that somebody's going to come in and start attacking people. Nobody.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. Like, no one should have to deal with, like, a fucking white nationalist. Besides, he's fucking watches, like, Steven Crowder or some other fucking dumbass like that. Being like, oh, these fucking people are trying to replace you or some bullshit like that. And end up shooting a fucking mosque, killing, like, a fuck ton of people.
Nobody should be worried. No woman should worry while she's walking down the street that somebody's going to tear her hijab off of her head. That's where things are at now, and in some ways, I think politicians have to be really, really careful about the role they play in fomenting hate and using dog whistle politics. It's.
I mean, she's absolutely right about that. The Conservatives have been using dog whistles like fucking nonstop, especially under, like, Aaron O'Toole. It was so fucking bad under Aaron O'Toole, literally just saying the Nazi parts out loud. As well as, it's not just the fucking Conservatives saying that shit. The PPC does it as well, but, like, they hold less political power than the fucking Greens do, so that ultimately doesn't even matter. But yeah, no, she is right about that. We do need to punish politicians that have that do fucking dog whistle politics. Punish them.
It's really, really a problem. We should show that leadership.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath. Let Mr.
through our
Dildugan.
actions.
Yeah, if I can just say, it's actually worse than they defunded the anti-racism director at the Ford Conservatives. They actually took that responsibility and lumped it in with the minister responsible for Ontario's prisons, which is a horribly backward way to view dealing with the anti-racism directorate, in my estimation. I'll also say that when our national capital was under an illegal occupation, the second largest city in Ontario, it took Mr. Ford days before he spoke out against the divisive scenes that we all saw in this province when statues like the Terry Fox statue were being desecrated by...
Like, why? Like, I don't understand why the Terry Fox statue was desecrated. Literally every fucking Canadian likes Terry Fox. Like, fucking ran halfway across Canada for cancer. Whilst, he was being fucking eaten alive by cancer. Like, who doesn't look to that and being like, that guy is a good guy. And, like, we'll have to look into Terry Fox a little bit more on stream, but no, like, it's ridiculous.
Anti-vaxxers. That's not the kind of leadership that brings Ontarians together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schreiner and Mr. Ford. Your turn, Mr. Schreiner. You can kick things off.
Two of the biggest challenges we face right now in Ontario is the rising levels of hate and white supremacy in this province.
True.
It's unacceptable, and we all have to be unified in speaking out against it. But we have to go further than words, and we have to turn them into actions. That's why I'm asking Mr. Ford.
Literally arrest anyone who has, like, fucking white supremacist attitude. If you have fucking white supremacist attitude, fucking handcuff them. Unfortunately, fortunately, that also goes for, like, a lot of the fucking cops too.
Ford, will you support the Our London Family Act? Will the next parliament have 4 parties that will get behind an act to bring in action to combat Islamophobia?
No, he won't.
Will you admit that it was wrong to eliminate the anti-racism directorate, bring it back, and properly fund it so we have concrete action to combat rising levels of anti-Black racism, especially, and anti-Indigenous racism in our province? And when it comes to the climate crisis, will you stop dismantling climate action plans? Will you stop dismantling environmental protections that actually many of them brought in by previous Conservative governments? Will you actually restore the ability of independent science-based organizations in this province to protect people in the places we love?
The only science he has is on Facebook, brother. That's...
adequately prepare us to be ready for the climate emergency that is bearing down on us right now.
Give him a chance to answer. Mr. Ford.
Well, Mr. Schreiner and my other 2 opponents here, make no mistake about it. We will not tolerate any racism of any kind in Ontario. Bottom line, full stop, you know it. We're actually putting millions of dollars of funding towards helping different communities in support to make sure outside of their mosque, they can have funds to have security there. But let me tell you something, Mr. Schreiner. There's a couple.
Yeah, he's definitely the Donald Trump of Canada. He says the exact same shit as Donald Trump. He's the Donald Trump of Canada. My mind will not be changed on this.
Things we can agree on. I'm not a big partisan guy. We get votes from the NDP, traditional NDP, Liberals, and PCs, and you're kind
you
of the
really
same.
though?
And what I like, at least Mr. Schreiner is honest and upfront. He says he's for higher taxes. He's for more regulations. And I just wish you would rub off on your other 2 colleagues, because they're for higher taxes and they're for a lot of regulations. But something, what I did.
I mean, regulations aren't necessarily a bad thing, though. Regulations, I actually think, are pretty a pretty good thing.
When we went to
Okay,
Medline
the
in
two of you
Guelph,
had your chance.
we worked together, Mike. And you're that type of guy that you can put the political stripes behind you. We went out to Medline, a huge company out in Guelph. We cut the ribbon together. I can work with Mr. Schreiner, and I can work with all levels of government, all different political stripes, and I showed it to the country. And I have a great relationship with 12 other premiers, great relationship with the federal government,
But I think
and a
the
great
question was
relationship
about
with 444
Yeah, this isn't the
municipalities.
question.
It's not
with
about
all
your
due
relationship
respect,
with
Mr.
other
Ford, I don't think
levels.
you sorry.
But that's okay. That's your answer. And now Steve will take it.
Okay. And under the rubric of leadership here, I know there are people watching us right now, and I want to come at this from a fiscal point of view, because we've seen all your platforms, and you are all pledging to spend billions and billions more than what's coming into the Treasury in revenues in an extremely buoyant economic time. And my question, which I'm sure many people are wondering right now, is do any of you feel any obligation to be more prudent in your spending plans? Okay, 45 seconds each, then open debate. Andrea Horvath, you get to go first.
Thanks very much. I want to let the people of Ontario know that we will not raise taxes on middle income and low income families because we know that you're hurting. But what we will do is be responsible with the government's treasury and make sure that we're putting in place the things, fixing the things that are broken. That's the best way to say it. Fixing the things that are broken in this province, the things that matter most to you, like our healthcare system, like our long-term care system, like our education system, making sure people have good jobs that pay the bills. These are things that people.
Unironically, some of the better paying jobs that will be in the future will be green energy jobs, and if you want to even focus on like construction by investing into infrastructure with rails, baby. So I want that trusty man.
People need to know that a government is there for them to address. I stand with everyday people before elections, during elections, and after elections, and I will continue to do that.
Thanks, Ms. Horvath. Doug Ford, your turn now.
Well, unlike the other three parties, I'm a strong believer in putting money back into people's pockets until they can go
But you
out and
haven't,
spend
though,
it
my
and stir
guy.
up the economy. There's 550,000 more people paying taxes now than they were under the Liberals and NDP. We'd lost 300,000 jobs. We want more companies to come here. As I said earlier, when companies come here, everyone thrives and prospers.
No, they don't.
There's an opportunity to get a job in every single sector. I am a strong believer of getting better jobs and bigger paychecks, and that's what's happening right now. We're invested record amounts in infrastructure, $157 billion. We believe in building roads and building highways, building schools and
Can't just
hospitals.
hyper-focus on roads.
Continue to make
Okay, Mr.
sure
Ford,
that
thank you.
Ontario
That's your time.
thrives.
Mike Schreiner, you're up next.
The COVID pandemic revealed the cracks in the foundation of Ontario, particularly our systems of care, and we can't simply pave over those cracks. We actually have to fix them. That's why we have to invest in people and expanding hospital capacity and putting people before profits in long-term care and making sure that our education system.
Or just put people before profits in general. That would help out tremendously. It's one of the main reasons why the USSR was so successful.
Is shored up. And so I won't raise taxes on low and middle income folks. But yeah, I'm going to ask wealthier people in this province to pay a bit more so we can have the funds to fix the foundation and so we can prepare for the next crisis, which is the climate crisis. I mean, people in Kenora are being evacuated right now due to flooding. We're having all these extreme weather events. We have to be
Mr.
ready
Schreiner,
for them.
Okay, Mr. Del Duca, you're up next.
Well, thanks very much. Look, I said earlier tonight that this election is about a choice. Governing is also about choosing. The Ontario Liberal plan that we put out a number of days ago is fully costed. You can see that we use the same fiscal anchors that the Financial Accountability Officer used, that the Auditor General validated. We anticipate being able to responsibly balance Ontario's books by 2026. But here's the important caveat. I will never cut and deliver chaos and havoc in public education, public health care, economic dignity and support for small businesses, elder care, and the fight against the climate crisis the way that Doug Ford has. So I believe in balance, moderation, and responsibility, but I will lead on those topics to make sure you have
Mr. Del Duca,
a
thank
province
you.
that is a place to grow.
I'm going to suggest the following question to kick off this 5-minute debate period, which is leadership also means leading on the most existential issue of our time, which is climate change. And Mr. Ford, why don't you start off this 5-minute period with, do you think you've done enough to fight climate change?
Well, right now we're at 94% clean energy, but I'm never happy until we hit 100%. But what we're doing, we're investing billions of dollars into jobs, long-term jobs that people will be able to have an income. We're changing lives in Windsor and in Oshawa and right across this province by attracting $14 billion of investment into electric vehicles. We have critical minerals up in the north, be it the graphite and the cobalt and the nickel that's going to build these batteries. It's going to come down through the supply chain into Hamilton in your own backyard that you fought against, changing over from a coal plant to electric arc furnace.
Oh, that's fucking great. Everyone was just laughing at him.
Along with Sault Ste. Marie, that's like taking 1 billion cars off
Okay,
the
stand by.
roads.
You've made an allegation against her. We have to let her respond to it. Go ahead.
Well, I think Mr. Ford just has a penchant for making stuff up again.
voted against
That's what he does over and over and over. But this is the premier that basically had a tantrum and tore out EV charging stations when he first took office. He tore up green energy contracts when he took office. Now he's seen the light, perhaps. I somehow doubt it. But what I can say is that New Democrats have a very strong...
I think he's too blind to see the light. Color is it? I don't know what color it is.
A program. It's called the Green New Democratic Deal. We'll get emissions down by 50% by 2030. By 2050, we'll have a zero carbon economy, and we'll do it by making great jobs that help with retrofits, having the first youth climate corps ever in North America, engaging young people in not only tree planting, but in mitigation.
Okay, let me get Mr. Del Duca to have a chance on this one.
Okay.
Too.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, this is such a huge topic for current and future generations. I do have to say on the clean energy piece, because Mr. Ford made a claim just a second ago, because he and his team have no plan to deal with Ontario's clean energy needs over the next few years, we anticipate that he will see, or under his leadership, there will be a 600% increase in fossil fuel burning fuel to produce Ontario's electricity in the next number of years. This is what happens when you have leadership that doesn't have the capacity to lead. And can I just say, earlier in the debate tonight, when we were talking about leadership, Mr. Ford talked about how hard he's been working. There's just one thing that I do want to put out there. Over the past 2 years, what we have seen in terms of Mr. Ford's attendance at question period has been appalling. More than 82% of the time set aside for him to respond to the opposition parties, he's been absent. Now, if you're watching at home and you don't show up for work 82% of the time, I suspect you don't get promoted. In fact, you don't keep your job. Same thing if you're in school and you don't show up 82% of the
We've
time.
got to be
Only
fair
Mr.
here.
Ford
We've got to be
wants
fair
to
here,
not
Mr.
show
Del
up
Duca.
and get rewarded.
We need to hear from Mr. Schreiner, and then Mr. Ford gets a chance to respond to that.
Thank you.
Let's be honest and let's be clear. The climate crisis is the biggest challenge we've ever faced. It's also a huge opportunity for Ontario to be a global leader in the new climate economy. But Mr. Ford, when he first came...
Honestly, I kind of wish that he would just dress up in all green and look like a leprechaun. Like, I think that would win over a lot of fucking voters, to be honest. Needs a little fucking green top hat, too. Really funny.
Came into office, dismantled all of Ontario's climate action plans. And then he started systematically dismantling environmental protections, many of them actually brought in by former Conservative governments, particularly Bill Davis. And he did it saying, oh, this is about cutting red tape. Well, I am sorry. Protecting people from flooding is not red tape. Protecting the farmland that feeds us is not red tape. Mr. Ford's plans to ramp up gas plants will increase climate pollution by 300% in Ontario, undermining all the hard work we did on the coal phase out. He wants to build electric vehicles, but he doesn't want the average person to be able to afford them. Our plan will make electric vehicles, new and used, and e-bikes available for people because it costs you $2,000 less a year to fill it up.
Okay, Mr.
Our
Schreiner, we need
plan-
to give Mr. Ford a chance to respond to some of the comments that were made. Go ahead, please.
Well, I appreciate the compliments from all three of them.
Wait,
Mr.
what?
Del Duca, first of all,
No one was
I can't
complimenting
believe
you.
the gall. You were the one in your party sold one of our crown jewels. You sold Ontario Hydro. Hydro won.
82%.
You know something? You
Didn't show
drove
up.
up hydro rates to the highest rates in North America.
I'd like to respond.
You drove out 300,000 jobs. We're creating more jobs, put more money back into people's pockets. All three of you are about hiking up gas prices. Gas prices. People can barely fill their tanks.
I mean, gas is not sustainable as a means of energy anyways, so why the fuck are we still using it? Like, it cost me like $60-$70 to fill up my fucking Neon's tank. It's pathetic.
Right now,
You're gonna
all
sit
three of
here
you
and defend
want to
big
jack
oil?
up the gas prices.
You're gonna defend
I'm
big
lowering
oil
the
when
gas
we're in a
prices.
climate emergency?
I'm making sure
You're
that we're
literally
getting rid of the
gonna
tolls
defend
that you
big
put
oil when we're
on,
in a climate emergency.
and we're going to make sure we aren't bringing back
Really?
that license plate sticker.
Jumping
ever
in for a
again.
second here because you made an allegation against Mr. Del Duca. He needs to respond.
Yeah, look, I just have to say, Mr. Ford seems to be the only person on the stage that doesn't realize he's been premier for the past 4 years, because he continues to try to fight the 2018 election all over again. We know in Ontario today, many of you watching at home tonight are struggling. You are concerned about what's happening to your kids, to your parents and grandparents, to our environment, whether or not you're going to be able to ever afford a home. And Mr. Ford keeps dishing out empty words and slogans. By the way, slogans that other people write for him, instead of sharing what's in his heart and his head. And this is after he's been in the job for 4 years.
I mean, I'm sorry, I don't think anything goes on in his fucking head. Like, he probably has like 3 fucking brain cells in there.
You don't show up for work 82% of the time, you lose your job. And tonight, Mr. Ford, you should lose yours on June 2nd, and you will lose yours on June 2nd.
Horvath, please. Last minute, Andrea.
I understand why you don't want to talk about the 2018 election, because you only retained 7 seats, and that's because you disappointed Ontarians. 15 years, and we had a sell-off of Hydro One. We had long-term care in an absolute mess. The gas plant sell-off. I mean, the gas plant scandal, rather.
5 seconds.
That's not leadership either,
5
Mr.
seconds.
Del Duca.
Respectfully, Ms. Horvath.
That's not leadership either.
Respectfully, Ms. Horvath, every time you attack me, as you've done for a year, Doug Ford smiles. Progressives need real leadership.
Gotta go.
And that's what
Here's
we're
the thing,
offering.
friends.
That's what we're
Friends, here we go. That's the end of the open debate here. We're going to try something a little different here before we go to closing statements, and that is, you've all had to make thousands of political decisions in your careers. I'd like to know which decision you regret the most. Mike Schreiner, you get to go first. 30 seconds here. Fire away.
Oh my goodness. I would say probably the one I regret was that I did not run in Guelph the first time I ran as leader. Even though it was a community I'd started a business in and had deep roots and a long-standing relationship with, I chose another riding to help out another one of our candidates. And that whole situation blew up in my face.
Thank you. Mr. Ford, decision you regret the most?
Well, it's probably similar to Mr. Schreiner's. I wish I would have run 4 years earlier. Then we wouldn't have to be dealing with all the mishaps that happened under the Liberal and NDP government. We'd be able to get so much further ahead, but right now, I would have to say that.
Mr. Del Duca.
I think one of the things that's a challenge when you're serving in a government is that sometimes you don't always listen necessarily. I think this is true of every politician, every level of government. You don't always listen really closely, despite your best efforts, to what the people in your local community are telling you about whether they feel you're being responsive to their needs. It can be very easy to sort of fall into the trap of doing your best and not necessarily paying close attention. I think that was a really important lesson that I learned through 2018, which was not an easy year for me at a political or personal level. And that's something that stays with me as a lesson learned
Thanks,
for going
Mr.
forward.
Del Duca. Ms. Horvath.
Thanks, Steve. My mom always taught me that if something goes wrong and you regret it, then you need to learn from it. You need to figure out why you regret it, why it didn't go the way that you want, and then do better. Learn from that mistake and do better. And I think a lot of parents told their kids that. And so I don't think about things in terms of regret. I think about things in terms of opportunity to learn and to do better for people the next time.
Good lesson.
Thanks, leaders. Althea.
And now it's time for closing statements. And again, the order was decided by a draw. Ms. Horvath, we begin with you.
Thanks so much. It's been my pleasure to chat with folks tonight and to talk to the other leaders. And thank you both, Althea and Steve. This election has a lot at stake. And what we need to do to fulfill a lot of the opportunities that we talked about tonight, all of that starts with defeating Doug Ford's government.
Literally anyone would be better than Doug Ford. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, even fucking, what's his name? Steven Del Duca would be better than fucking Doug Ford. I don't even like him all that much. Like, I would love fucking Mike Schooner or Heather Horwath. Be honest, like, those are my two top picks. She's my number one pick, but Mike is my second pick.
There's really only one shot at this point in time to do that, and that's with the NDP. So I'm asking people this time, come together under the NDP so we can defeat Doug Ford and start fixing the things that matter most to
very
me.
much. Mr. Del Duca.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I hope you've enjoyed this clash of ideas, of the discussion about Ontario's future and where we go next. I said earlier tonight, I know that so many of you are struggling. I know that we are a strong and resilient people, and we will get through this together. But I want you to know I love this province. It's where I've spent my whole life. It's where my wife and I, of course, are raising our daughters. And I want you to know that as Premier, I will work relentlessly for students, for seniors, for economic dignity, for a clean environment, for small business, and for our future. We will be a place to grow.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ford.
Well, tonight you heard very different visions of the future of Ontario. You'll have a very clear choice on Election Day. You can vote for any three of these parties, but I'll tell you, they're going to jack up your taxes like you've never seen, like they did before, and they're going to make life a lot more expensive. Or you can vote for the PCs that have a vision and have a plan to continue with prosperity throughout this whole...
Bro, what's your fucking vision? Like, wanting to fucking shoot up crack? Like, what? I mean, you gotta keep the family tradition alive, right?
Province. Folks, I'm asking for your vote on June the 2nd. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Mr. Schreiner.
We need a parliament that's going to meet the moment. We finally have a Green MPP at Queen's Park who's punched well above his weight over the last 4 years. And I need more Green MPPs from places like University Rosedale, Diane Sachs. By the way, Mr. Ford, you fired the wrong environment commissioner. I need people like Matt Richter in Parry Sound, Muskoka, because I wished I'd been there 4 years sooner. So we were more prepared for the crisis that's bearing down on us, the climate crisis.
Mr. Schreiner, thank you very much. That is our time. Thank you very much, candidates. Doug Ford, Andrea Horvath, Steven Del Duca, Mike Schreiner.
And a reminder, there are 10 days of advance polls starting May 19th, plus Election Day itself on June the 2nd. Go to the Elections Ontario website for more information on where and how to vote.
That's right. Please vote. And thanks, everybody, for watching, and good night.
Thanks,
Good night, everybody.
All right. So, yeah, literally anyone but fucking Doug Ford would be better. Like, look at this. Do you really want this fucking Trump bod? Like, he clearly has the Trump bod. Like, there's no shot. They look so similar from the side. I can't tell if this is fucking Trump or if this is Ford. Like, who is this man? Honestly, the person who I think will probably be likely to defeat Ford will probably be Del Duca, even though he's complete garbo. But I guess we'll know after June 2nd. But until the next time, it was fun. Didn't realize I had a little bit of a mic problem early on, so that kind of sucks. But anyways, yeah, we'll see you next